Placement is down. The kick is up. Doesn't have a lot of distance, but this one is no good, and LSU will get out of Columbia with the win. Tigers win. Tigers win.
Just absolutely gut-wrenching. Gut-wrenching is about the only way that I can describe how South Carolina Gamecock fans feel today. Not just today, Saturday night. Not just today and Saturday night, but all weekend, right? South Carolina Gamecock fans, man, I don't know that I can ever say I feel for you today more than I ever have. I don't know if I can ever say I felt more bad for South Carolina Gamecock fans than I have this weekend. And you know what? That's where I want to go. That's where we've got to start this thing. And yes, we do have breaking Bryce Young breaking Bryce Young news. We know that there's been huge, and I mean huge, news out of Charlotte when it comes to Bryce Young. We'll get to that. But we have to start with South Carolina Gamecock fans. I feel bad for you. I feel for you, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you and see if your feelings have changed. I know Saturday night it was kind of like a raw, like a numb reaction, right? It was so tough to take in. And Sunday, I talked to Gamecock fans on Sunday who still had that same kind of numbing feeling of, man, is this real life? Was this a nightmare? Or did we really lose this game on Saturday after being up 17-0? Welcome into Wire to Wire. I'm Cole Bryson. Diesel is not with us today. He will be back tomorrow. Had a few things he had to take care of, but he will rejoin us tomorrow. A huge show coming your way. A ton of South Carolina Gamecock conversation. We'll also talk about Bryce Young and the news that just broke a few minutes ago. If you have not heard, Bryce Young has been benched by the Carolina Panthers. They are turning to Andy Dalton. We'll talk to David Hood a little bit later in the program of Tiger Net. We'll give you the upset picks leaderboard. Not a good weekend for me in the upset picks challenge brought to you by Ingles. But we will also talk to Jack Veltri of Gamecock Central in the 5 o'clock hour. A loaded show coming your way. You can chime in 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Again, that's 71307, keyword fan. We're also live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Again, I am solo today. Diesel will be back tomorrow. Renewal of the Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone lines are open. Caller, I saw you pop in for a second and you hung up. If you want to call back, you're more than welcome to do so. 844-FAN-PHONE is the way you can call into the show. 844-326-3663. JB chimes in the YouTube stream, says, Tolo, what's up, JB? Good to be with you, man. Glad to have you along for the ride today. A loaded show coming your way. JB starts in strong on the YouTube stream and says, Carolina got robbed by those LSU refs. I'm ticked off is what JB, I think, was meaning to say. I'm still ticked off is how I'm feeling right now. Is what one South Carolina Gamecock fan says in the YouTube stream. Man, where do you start? Where do you start with Saturday's loss? I mean, I was there. And to see the environment, let me start with that. To see the environment that South Carolina had on Saturday with College Game Day, man, it's hard to put into words how amazing the environment was on Saturday in Williams-Brice Stadium. And then a noon kick. And obviously, I think that would have been a lot better of an atmosphere. Even though it was fantastic, I think it would have been a better atmosphere had it been a 3:30 kick a little bit later, just to give some time for fans to get in. I mean, College Game Day had to go from the Gamecock Park into the stadium and finish the set there. So before we actually get into the game, I'll tell you this. The atmosphere, A+. Absolute A+ atmosphere for South Carolina Gamecock fans. I've been to a lot of South Carolina football games over my lifetime, my short lifetime, but over my lifetime, I've been to Williams-Brice Stadium quite a few times. And what I saw Saturday was truly electric. South Carolina Gamecock fans showed up and showed out on Saturday. It was a fantastic crowd, nearly 80,000 people on hand, and what a ball game. It goes 17-0. South Carolina goes up 17-0, and boy, if you're sitting there in the press box where I was on Saturday, you watch South Carolina go up 17-0, and you kind of sit there and think, wait a minute, what? What are we watching right now? South Carolina goes up 17-0. Everyone's kind of looking around like, who's this team? Who are these guys? We all know how the game went, right? I'm not going to sit here and go through every quarter and every drive and every play because we all know how the game went. However, it's never good after a game to be talking about the officiating more than the actual game. And you know what? Especially as a radio show host, man, like I think it's a lazy take. I think it's a lazy road to venture down to just blame the officials. And I try my best not to do that, but guess what? Today, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be the guy today that doesn't blame the officials because what I watched on Saturday absolutely had to do with horrible, and I mean absolutely horrible, officiating on the part of that lousy crew. I don't know what conference they were from or how that crew got that game, but it was absolutely horrible what happened in terms of the officiating. Now, one thing, before we get deep into the conversation, one thing I want fans to remember, and we've got a ton of texts coming in, a ton of comments on the YouTube stream as well, where we're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I want fans to remember, whether you're a Clemson fan or a South Carolina fan or a fan of another team, it's very important to remember that more than one thing can be true, right? A lot of times we just assume that only one thing can be true when talking about a certain game. Well, I'll tell you this. I will tell you that, in my opinion, South Carolina did get hosed by the officiating. I think that is true. There were 3 just very questionable calls. What I also think is true is South Carolina made a few boneheaded decisions, a few boneheaded plays that went into the formula of costing them the game. When you look at what's costed South Carolina the football game on Saturday, I don't think it's fair to say it was only this or it was only that. I think there were multiple factors that went in, right? Like, if you watch that game from the first half to the second half, it was like the tables completely turned against South Carolina in the second half. From your quarterback going down to the officiating, I mean, the tables could not have turned in a worse way for you if you were a Gamecock fan. Like, it was a drastic turn. I don't think I've ever seen that drastic of a turn from the first half, Lenoris going down, and boy, it just seemed like it was a different game a little bit later on. And we'll get into the calls. There were some that I was just simply not happy with. All right, let's go to the text line. But before we do that, I want to get to a few comments on the stream. On the YouTube stream, the Oculus says, I know losing sucks and the calls were suspect, but you have to feel good about the last 2 games compared to where you were struggling with Old Dominion. Great job improving week to week. Oculus, I completely agree with you. I think that's a good way to look at it, and I can't push back on that. I do agree that South Carolina looks the part. I mean, think about this for a minute. And caller, I'm coming to you. South Carolina went toe-to-toe with LSU. I remember a lot of South Carolina Gamecock teams that would not have gotten off the bus Saturday. That wouldn't even gotten off the bus. Bullish Rebel on YouTube. He chimes in. How you blow a 17-point lead. Having the refs wipe out 17 points you earned to make up for earlier mistakes that would have made the end score 47-36. I know a lot of frustration. A lot of frustration on the part of Gamecock fans for not only the play, Not only Lenoris going down, but the officiating. All right, to the text line we go, and then I'll give you more of my thoughts on the game because I have a list of thoughts, and I mean a list of them. I was there. I was in the press box. I had to watch it just like you did. All right, texter 419. Brutal offensive pass interference call that wasn't there, and the ridiculous blindside unsportsmanlike that didn't exist either killed the Gamecocks. Texter, the pass interference, the offensive pass interference is the call that really does me in, man. That's the call that really does me in. I get the horse collar. I get the quarterback after the interception. I understand the rule, but the offensive pass interference, man, that's the one that I just can't stomach. That's the one that I cannot, if I was a South Carolina fan, that would be the one that I would have trouble sleeping with at night. Let's see, 384. It hurts as a Clemson fan to say it, but they should have won the game, probably by 2 touchdowns. That's where we are. That's where we are, South Carolina fans. I want, whether you're a fan of South Carolina, Clemson, or whoever it may be, think about that for a minute. I have heard all weekend long droves and droves of Clemson fans coming to the defense of South Carolina. And if you don't know this already, let me just point out, that doesn't happen much. That doesn't happen much. So think about that. If you're on the side today of, oh, you can't blame the refs, just think about the fact that Clemson fans are coming to the defense of South Carolina. What does that say? I mean, really? Clemson fans all weekend. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on Facebook. They're there. They're with you. And look, I'm not a Gamecock fan, but I'm frustrated watching that. How can you not be? So that's where I want to go. How do you feel as South Carolina Gamecock fans today? Let's see. On the text line, Mike Maine. What's up, Mike? Mike says, if we would have lost without controversy, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. The pick six with a soft block on Nussmeier is what pissed me off. And you should be. Tolo KJ chimes in. We've all had to play against the refs at one point. Not sorry, ... wide left. Mike Main pointed out, even Josh Pate thinks we got hosed by the officiating. I saw Josh Pate at the game Saturday. You're right. I saw his Twitter. I saw his comments. It was hard. Look, here's the reality of it. If you watch the game Saturday without an agenda, you can't disagree with what we're saying. Now, if you watch the game with an agenda, then you'll say, oh, yeah, you can't blame it on the refs. You lost the game. You blew a 17-point lead. But if you watched the game with an agenda, of course you're gonna say South Carolina should have won the game. Of course you're not going to blame the officials. Texter from the 907 says, can't blame it on the refs. Got to still stop them and stop having penalties. Well, Texter, I agree with you. Some of it is self-inflicted. 13 penalties for 100-plus yards is way too many penalties. However, some of those penalties weren't really penalties. I didn't see offensive pass interference. They showed the replay in the press box on the TVs. I still didn't see pass interference, offensive. 809 chimes in. Forget both pick six calls. Explain the pass interference. That was a 32-yard pass wiped out, plus 15. Then they fumbled on the 12. Next play was a 50-yard play that killed them. Honest Clemson fans have been very fair saying the same thing. So on the PI call, on the offensive pass interference call, that ball, by the way, that Robbie Ashford threw, which was a good ball, it was a good pass. You catch that ball, and in my opinion, you win the game. The game's over. there's no discussion today about the officiating. Were there bad calls prior to that? Absolutely. But if that PI is not called, I don't think the officiating is being talked about like it is today. Because, in my opinion, you catch that football like they did, like South Carolina did, and it was a really good ball by Robbie Ashford. That's the ball game. And, yeah, I know if Lenoris doesn't get hurt, they probably win that way as well. But you cannot control Lenoris Sellers getting hurt. You can't control the referees and the officiating crew either. I get that. But 13 penalties for 123 yards just isn't acceptable. Joshua on the Facebook stream says, true, it was no offensive pass interference. I'll tell you where I think South Carolina lost the game. And yes, I've made no bones about it on social media as well as on the show so far today. The officials, in my opinion, had a large part in the loss. However, in my opinion, this game was won in the third quarter by LSU. A lot of times, games are won in the fourth quarter. But this game, in my opinion, was won in the third quarter. Excuse me. When you look at the third quarter statistics, LSU scored 6, you scored 0 if you're South Carolina. Well, you say, well, Cole, 6-0 is not really that big of a difference. Well, 6 points cost you the game, right? You lost by 3. You had those 6 back that LSU didn't score, or you score 6 more. Guess what? You're probably not losing the game. Well, here's where I really believe the third quarter decided the game. Third quarter only, LSU had 175 yards to your 1 yard of total offense. South Carolina had 1 yard of total offense in the third quarter of play. 1 yard. They literally took up the entire third quarter. Time of possession, 11 minutes and 10 seconds, and you had the ball for just over 3 minutes. You punted twice, by the way. Not only could you not sustain drives in those 2 possessions, you had to punt twice. So, yes, while there were huge factors that went into that game in the fourth quarter, I believe the game was lost in the third. The third quarter was basically non-existent for South Carolina's offense. Like, they played the first, the second, and the fourth. They didn't get the ball in the third much. They didn't do anything in the third quarter. 1 yard's all they had. Again, I've said it from the very beginning. South Carolina was indeed hosed. The offensive pass interference call was the worst call of the game. It was the absolute worst call of the game. However, the loss is not attributed to one single factor. There are multiple factors that go into the loss. And I agree with you, Ricky, on the Facebook stream. Ricky says, after Sellers got hurt, the game was over. Look, I don't want to say the game was over, but I will say this, Ricky. I don't think South Carolina loses that game if Lenoris Sellers goes down. I really don't. T Swizzle on the YouTube stream says officials were bad, but USC lost that game that shouldn't have even been a game. And I get that point of it. Like, you were up 17-0, right? But here's my issue with that. You're up 17-0. But if you know football, and you've watched football long enough to know, LSU, like, you just had a feeling LSU wasn't going to lay down and roll over. LSU was going to do something. And once they started moving the football, you did feel as if LSU's going to come back and this thing's going to get close. It is very easy. It is very, very easy to say, oh, South Carolina up 17 should have put their wrist on their throat and just choked them out. That's easier said than done, man. That is so much easier said than done. You're going up against a very good team in LSU. You went up 17-0. Yeah, did you blow the 17-point lead? Yes, you did, but you can't just act like you're up 17-0 against Old Dominion. You can't act like you were up 17-0 against Akron. You were up 17-0 against a very good LSU team who had the better quarterback and probably better receivers. If you didn't think they were going to come back, I can't tell you what. I just can't tell you what to believe there. All right, to the text line real quick, and then we'll run. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you what. Let me run. Let's take a quick break, come back. Let's pay some bills. A ton of text coming in right now on the text line. 71307 is the way you can text the show, 71307. Start your text with the word fan. We'll dive right back into the conversation as well as get to Bryce Young at some point. Caller, I was coming to you. If you want to call back, I'll get you on the other side. This is the South Carolina Gamecocks conversation right now. However, we will get to Bryce Young. I know we had some huge Bryce Young news, but there's a ton of text messages coming in. And I still have a few thoughts as well. Again, a tough loss for South Carolina. However, at the end of the day, you went toe-to-toe. I'm not a moral victory guy, but you went toe-to-toe with a very good LSU team. I think there's a ton of positive, and I mean a ton of positive to take away. We'll continue the conversation as well as get to your thoughts next.
This is Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the...
Continuing the conversation, South Carolina LSU, we've had over 25 texts come in during the first segment, so if I don't get to all of them, I apologize. I am solo today. Diesel will be back tomorrow, but I did want to start this segment off with two comments, one from JD and one from Wesley. Let's start with Wesley's comment on the Facebook stream. Appreciate you listening or watching, however you're doing so. So many ways to do it. 97.1 Spartanburg, 97.7 Greenville, the free Odyssey app, AUDACY. If you haven't downloaded that app yet, I encourage you to do so today. All right, Wesley, on the Facebook stream, if you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, you can now see Wesley's comment. I did put it on the main screen. And here's where I want to push back a little bit. Wesley says South Carolina had 3 turnovers and a missed field goal to tie. Sellers had 1 interception and a fumble. Can't blame the refs even with a bad call. Bad calls happen every game. Wesley, I completely disagree with you. I do. I love you, but I disagree. I couldn't disagree more. Let's first start with a missed field goal. What are we going to blame the kicker for missing a 50-yard? What was it? 40? I mean, I don't know exactly what 49, 50-yard field goal, a very long field goal. It wasn't a chip shot. So first of all, are we going to blame the kicker for being iced and missing it the second time? You can't put blame on the kicker. I mean, it was a very long field goal. And then Wesley goes on to say, can't blame the refs even with a bad call. That statement there alone is so contradictory. You can't blame the refs even with a bad call. Well, what do you mean? You just said it's a bad call. How do you not blame the refs? If it's a bad call, it's a bad call. And then, Wesley, you go on to say bad calls happen every game. Well, guess what? Yeah, they do happen every game. But the calls that happened in Columbia Saturday, do you know what they were? They were game-altering calls. That's the difference. A holding call that's a bad call in the second quarter with 7 minutes to go in a football game is a lot different than a call that takes 7 points off the board. Oh, and by the way, South Carolina had 2 calls that took 14 potential points off of the board. JD says, I think it was a 52-yard field goal. Thank you, JD. It was a very long field goal. So let's not act like these were just an illegal man downfield, with 12 minutes to go in the third quarter kind of calls. These were literally game-altering calls, and if you go back and watch, heck, even the announcers that were calling the game, Kirk and was Kirk Herbstreit, right? I wasn't listening. I was in the press box. But people, Gamecock fans, told me, look, Cole, even the announcer said on the offensive pass interference, there was no offensive pass interference. Where's the call? You're calling that? So to say, Wesley, to say that bad calls happen every game, yeah, bad calls do happen every game. These are human beings that are officiating these games. I completely get that. But like I said earlier, if you watch the game without an agenda, keyword, without an agenda, you cannot sit there and say, oh, that game wasn't altered by the refs. You just can't. If you have an agenda, if you're a diehard Clemson fan that's never going to agree with South Carolina fans, of course you can say, well, you should have won the game. Blew a 17-point lead. It's easy to say. But the reality is, man, everybody's seeing the same thing and everybody's saying the same thing. It's not like there are 14 Gamecock fans shouting from the mountaintop, oh, it was a bad call. Literally the entire country, Josh Pate, Kirk Herbstreit, Clemson fans. That should be right there, all you need to know. When you have had several on text line already today. When Clemson fans are saying that it was a horrible officiating job, that's when that's when you realize, okay, Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't a absolute horrible performance by the officiating crew. Did South Carolina allow LSU back in the game? Sure. And JD, I wanted to get to your comment as well about the defense going more conservative. They did change to an odd man front. However, I don't know that changing to an odd man front makes me believe that they went conservative. I understand that South Carolina fans had frustrations with the change in the front from the first quarter to the second quarter. Because once South Carolina did go to the odd man front, LSU was able to move the ball. And let's also remember another thing, JD, not just you, but everybody as a totality here. When LSU starts moving the ball Saturday, when LSU starts getting a push up front, let's remember that it's not always just the defense allowing them, hey guys, we're going to back up and allow you to do whatever you're going to do. A lot of it has to do with how good that offense is. Let's call a spade here. LSU's offensive line, receiver and quarterback, their offense as a group is better than South Carolina's offense. They're the better offense. And guess what? LSU started to impose their will. Can you blame the defense? Yeah, you can blame defense for this and that, but to say they went conservative, LSU started imposing their will. That's what LSU had. Dudes up front. They have really good receivers. And just as a texter pointed out a few minutes ago, they did have the better quarterback. Even when Lenoris was balling, I still think LSU's offense was better. So to just sit there and think, oh, they're gonna lay down, I do think that's foolish to think. And I'm not saying anybody's thinking that specifically, but when you're playing a good team, we've seen it at every level, high school, college, and pro. When you're playing a good team, sometimes you can pop out and get an early lead. But when you're playing a good team, you have to expect them to be able to punch you back, right? They're going to punch you back. They're going to respond. And that's what LSU did. That's exactly what they did. Texter says they went to rushing 3 and dropping 9 instead of rushing 4 to 5 like they did all day. And again, I know there were some changes defensively, but you know what? I will also say this. The casual fans, including myself, when we watch the game, we see a change in offense and defense and think, oh, well, that's stupid. Why are we doing that? In reality, we don't know why they changed it. Maybe they saw something that LSU was doing different. Was LSU doing something different that made South Carolina change? We can't always just assume we know better than the coaches. I'm not saying the coaches were in the right, but I do believe in Clayton White. I do believe Clayton White's the right guy for the job, and I do believe Clayton White's a very good defensive coordinator. So to think Clayton White would just say, oh, I'm bored. Let's do a new coverage out there and just see if they can react to it. I don't know if I completely believe that or not. So, again, the third quarter where you went out there and ran, 5 plays? Not many plays at all. 6 plays compared to LSU's 23 plays. And you had a 1 yard. That's a yard with a D, no S on the end there, compared to LSU's 175 yards. That's brutal. You let LSU live, basically. Sitting there watching the game, you let LSU live in your territory the entire second half. It felt like. And I know it wasn't the entirety of it, but it felt like that LSU lived in South Carolina territory for the majority of the game. So, we've talked about what's happened. We've talked about the officiating, which I've said was horrible, horrendous, whatever adjective, however you want to call it. It was bad. But the bright spots are there. And if you're a South Carolina Gamecock fan today, I do think that while you can be disgusted, and we've certainly had text messages and messages on the stream displaying the disgust that South Carolina Gamecocks have. However, there are positives to take away. And you have to feel good. And again, I'm not a moral victory guy, but you have to feel good about going toe-to-toe with LSU. You represented the university well. The entire nation was watching you on Saturday. You showed up, you showed out, you started fast, and you went toe-to-toe with a very good LSU team. Now, I know Shane Beamer said in his post-game press conference that LSU's a playoff team. I don't know if I agree with that, but they may be when the season's over. We'll see. I personally don't think they are, but they're a good team. So the first positive to take away, did you watch your quarterback play before he got hurt? Did you watch Lenora Sellers before he went down on Saturday? There's absolute, again, I don't want to sit here and just act like Lenora Sellers is going to be the best thing ever in South Carolina, but there is an absolutely incredible bright side, an incredible future ahead for South Carolina's quarterback position. I mean, a very bright future. Lenoris looked good on Saturday. And if you say, oh, well, Lenoris didn't throw the ball a ton, that's just not who he is. He's a guy that what I saw on Saturday compared to what I saw against Old Dominion, he was a little bit more patient on Saturday. He was a little bit more comfortable on Saturday, even with his runs in the 75-yard run. That was absolutely fantastic. That run by itself was just game-changing. Looked like Cam Newton out there is what he looked like. But Lenoris was more patient, even with his runs. He didn't just snap the ball and take off. It looked as if he was allowing, the offensive line to take on the identity of where they were going. He was more patient and running behind the offensive line. And I thought he did a fantastic job. So the first positive is Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers on Saturday was really, really good. Your defense, even though you gave up too many points, you've got dudes. You've got dudes and you've got depth on the defense side of the football. Look, I think there's a very valid point in the old adage of sometimes you have to learn how to win before you win. I really believe that reigns true, especially with this team, man. Like, while they do have veterans, this is a different team, in my opinion. They've got to learn how to win these type games. And it relates to LSU as well, man. Like LSU against Southern Cal, you saw how the coach was. You saw how Brian Kelly was in the postgame press conference. He was very upset, right? And that's what he preached. He preached finish. And guess what? LSU, they had help from the refs, but on Saturday, LSU finished. You saw a team Saturday with LSU who knew how to win. They'd been there a few weeks prior with Southern Cal. They knew how to win on Saturday in Columbia. I do think South Carolina, when you're talking about the positives and the bright spots, South Carolina now has a chance to take what happened and turn it into positives, or turn it into a positive, rather. And I think South Carolina, again, they'll be underdogs in the majority of the games they play this year. But I do believe South Carolina will upset someone this year that they're not supposed to. I really do. I think you're seeing this team grow up, and you have to take lumps. You have to take your bruises. You have to take your black eyes. And I believe that's what that game was for South Carolina. It was a black eye. It was a bruise. It was a shot, and you had to withstand the shot. You didn't come out on top. But I believe South Carolina will be better because of it. Texter from the 230 says, I think Sellers wearing contacts really helped him also. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show because we talked about that post game with him. And, you're right. Sellers did wear contacts on Saturday compared to the normal goggles that he wears. Look, is it the end-all, be-all? No, but I definitely think it plays a part for sure. All right, we've got to get to upset picks. We also have to get to the breaking news from earlier today, right before we went on the air. Bryce Young benched. We'll get to that next.
to Wire with Cole, Bryson, and Diesel on the
Bullish Rebel on the YouTube stream says you can't say they finished if you also said they got help. Again, Bullish Rebel, two things can be true. LSU did score and make plays in the fourth quarter to win the game after they were down. They made plays. They've got talented dudes. More than one thing can be true. Remember that. Yes, I think South Carolina got screwed. I agree with you. But those 14 points or whatever it was that LSU scored in the fourth quarter, the refs didn't score those points. LSU did. LSU scored those points. All right, we'll get back to the South Carolina Gamecocks conversation because there have been a ton, and I mean a ton, of text roll in. 71307. Start your text with the word fan. I can't get to them all, but I'll try to get back to them a little bit later in the show as there was some breaking news before we went on the air today. I say Diesel is out today. He'll be back tomorrow. When news like this breaks, normally you lead with it. However, South Carolina's that's the topic of conversation, right? That's what everybody is talking about right now in our neck of the woods. So that's where we started off the show. However, in case you missed it, right before I went on the air today, news came out that Bryce Young has been benched and Andy Dalton will be the starting quarterback. So the decision to bench Bryce Young was made by Dave Canales today, General Manager Dan Morgan, and Executive Vice President Brant Tilleff. Sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter the team was informed of the move during position meetings today. Dave Canales' his exact words were, Andy gives us our best chance moving forward, adding that Young will serve as the backup to Dalton against the Raiders. So here we are, over a year now of Bryce Young being the quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. And now we get news today that he's been benched. What does this mean for Bryce Young's future? But also, what does this mean for the Carolina Panthers right now? I think it's very important for Carolina Panther fans to understand that this doesn't necessarily mean it's time to hit the panic button. However, I see why you would, right? Like, I see why you would hit that panic button if you hit it today. It's got to be alarming that Bryce Young's been benched because we know that Bryce Young hasn't been good. So Dave Canales is simply saying, look, I feel as if Andy Dalton right now gives us the best chance to win. I know a lot of people on our Facebook page, on Twitter, Diesel said it before, a lot of people believe that Andy Dalton should have been the quarterback last year, that Bryce Young should not have started last year. And I understand the reasoning there. I understand the philosophies of drafting a guy, allowing him to learn right behind a veteran quarterback like Andy Dalton. However, somebody in the Panthers organization missed big time. I don't know if Bryce Young will ever play another snap for Carolina or if he plays a lot more snaps. I will tell you this. My opinion, and I've heard from a lot of Panthers fans, Bryce Young's not it. Bryce Young's not the guy. Like, I'm sorry. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give him the first two games this year to just see if we could find any improvement whatsoever. I gave him the benefit of the doubt during the offseason and said, look, he was coached by Nick Saban. He was a very good quarterback in college. Maybe he just needed an offense or needed an offseason rather, and a new offense with a new head coach. And through two games, and I know 2 games is a very small sample size. However, through 2 games, Bryce Young doesn't look any better. In fact, at times he looks worse. It looks as if at times he has regressed. I mean, simply put, he's not good right now. And I believe Dave Canales gave him another week against the Chargers to see if you could find any improvement. You had a couple of turnovers yesterday where the defense played well and put you in positions, and Bryce Young just absolutely did nothing. He did nothing. Even when he had good field position, he did nothing. I think the Panthers made the right decision by putting Bryce Young on the bench. However, I'll tell you this. There's definitely now that Bryce Young's been benched, there's definitely a conversation to be had about where do you go now? Where do you go from here? Do you believe Bryce Young's the guy? Does Dan Morgan and Dave Canales in their heart of hearts believe Bryce Young's the guy? Because I don't. I don't think he's the guy. I'm not saying Panthers fans should just hit the panic button and push the sell out to push it out to sea. However, if you want to win games now, and oh, by the way, that's what Dave Canales was hired to do, you got to move forward with Andy Dalton. You got to throw Andy Dalton again, out there against the Raiders. He gives you the better chance. He's a veteran. He can read defenses a lot better than Bryce Young. And now, all of a sudden, the Panthers should have a chance against the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, real quick, before we run to a break, let's go to the phones, 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. I am solo today, so you'll have to give your name on the air. Let's go to our first caller. Who do we have? You're on the air. Caller, we got you? I guess not. That's a big 0 for 1. So, sorry, caller. We went to you, but you did not answer the, we went to you, but you didn't talk. You didn't answer the call. Didn't answer the bell. You're basically Bryce Young right now, caller. We came to you, and you didn't step up to the plate. I'm sorry. That might have been a little too soon, right? All right, we'll get back to the South Carolina conversation. Give you my thoughts on Shane Beamer, what South Carolina's projection now is for the rest of the 2024 season. And I'll also tell you why, despite the loss Saturday, I'll also tell you why I do think Shane Beamer's the right guy to lead South Carolina where they need to go. All that and more next.
Unfiltered sports insanity on Wire to Wire with Cole Bryson and Diesel on the Fan Upstate.
This is the story of the one. As a facility technician installing a new welding station, he knows getting the ventilation right is critical for safety. That's why when questions arise, there's Granger. Granger offers detailed technical product information online at his fingertips, so it's easy to find what he needs. Because when it comes to safety, having answers means he and his people can breathe a little easier. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by.
Tiger pal Rachel chimes in on the text line, which you can do 71307. Start your text with the word fan, F-A-N. Tiger pal Rachel says, I got to say, as a Panthers fan, this now gives a little hope. Maybe we can win a few with Dalton and possibly revisit Bryce Young later. Let me click on the rest of the text, Tiger pal, so I can see it. I'd rather see this than, oh, well, let's lose all season for the next number one pick to screw up again. Tiger pal Rachel, that's actually a good point. It really is, because there are a lot of people out there who would say you're hurting your draft position by putting Andy Dalton in as the quarterback, right? Because maybe Andy Dalton does win a few games. Maybe Andy Dalton does get you to 4 or 5 wins on the season, and then you do not have the number one pick anymore. The Giants do, right? Because the Giants are hot garbage. Now, again, like who was it that pointed out earlier in the stream? I can't really call a lot of teams hot garbage right now without, pointing one finger back at me. Mark L.O. Duck says, how about those Cowboys earlier? I can't find it now, but he was asking me about those Cowboys, and I get it. Not a good day for my Cowboys yesterday, or I'm sorry, Mark said, how about those Cowgirls? Mark, you're right. A very bad day. Look, I've been trying to have a positive Monday, so I'm not even going to get into that right now. We might later in the show. We might later in the program, because what you saw yesterday with Dallas was atrocious, and I mean atrocious. And yes, Rob Brown's New Orleans Saints did come out on top. And I don't know if the Saints are just really good all of a sudden, or what the issue is. But, man, 2 weeks in a row now, the New Orleans Saints have looked like world beaters. So I have no idea what to believe there. But they've looked pretty good. All right, I believe it was Dewey who we had on earlier who we could not get through. Dewey, is that you back, man?
Yes, I got some things I got to say.
Well, first of all, I gave you the floor earlier, and you showed up like Bryce Young. You wet the bed. What happened?
I don't know.
All right, what do you have to say?
First of all, those refs should be investigated. All of them should be investigated.
The refs should be investigated, okay? What's your second comment?
Secondly, the kicker who missed the game-tying run should be kicked off the team. There's no excuses. You got to be clutch.
The game-tying run or the game-tying points?
The point.
Okay, there we go. Kick him off the team, Dewey, right? Just kick him off the team, a 50-yard field goal.
They would have tied the game, went in overtime, and probably won.
Yeah, you're right. A 50-yard field goal, I mean, that's a chip shot, right? He should have made it.
He should have made it. And if Georgia or Alabama would have made it, they should have made it too. And thirdly, Bryce Young's career was over. He sucks. And the Carolina Panthers franchise should be demolished.
That bad, huh? Thank you for the call, Dewey. As Dewey says, thirdly, Bryce Young sucks. Wise words from what I've coined the Daily Dewey. That's how you can get in touch with the show. 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. Phone lines are open, as you just heard. Dewey starting us off. So if you've got better than that, if you've got a better comment, if you can do better than Dewey, I invite you to do so. So a lot of comments about Bryce Young, and I get it. Like, I know we had that last segment about Bryce and the Carolina Panthers, and, it's a tough place for their fan base to be in because, I do feel for them. I mean, look, you had a chance to take C.J. Stroud, and your owner didn't want to because of a test score, and instead you're stuck with the midget who can't see over the offensive line. And, it's tough, man. It's tough. I think that Bryce Young has talent. But for whatever reason, It's not translating to the NFL. And look, that happens. That happens a lot. There are a lot of players that are fantastic college quarterbacks that just don't translate. It happens. However, when you go for the number one pick and you have the number one pick, you're not supposed to miss. You can't afford to miss on the number one pick. And that's what the Carolina Panthers did. So again, it stinks for the Panthers fans, but what stinks even more is watching CJ Stroud. And look, I'll be very honest. I don't think that CJ Stroud in Carolina would be the best thing ever since sliced bread right now. However, he couldn't be any worse. What's worse right now than what you have? I mean, what's worse than what you have currently with Bryce Young? Mark L. on the YouTube stream says, another show earlier today said the Pac-12 is looking for two more teams. They said the Giants and the Panthers could fill those spots. Mark, that's bad, but very funny. The Giants and the Carolina Panthers potentially filling the spots in the Pac-12. Yeah, you're right. I guess they're both right now that bad. However, like I said, I can't talk a lot of trash today because my team looked like trash yesterday. Michael in Simpsonville chimes on the text line, 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Michael in Simpsonville says, I'm kicking Dewey off of our Gamecock fan club. Dewey's one of a kind, man. Texter says, Cole, keep your head up. I'm a Gamecock and Bengals fan. Texter, it's tough right now for you, especially this weekend, so I get it. The Bengals, man, yesterday, that was God, what a game that was. If I was a Cincinnati fan today, I'd be very upset. A very good game yesterday that, you know what, I thought Joe Burrow, I thought he showed up. I thought he silenced a lot of critics yesterday. Obviously, they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, but you're right. Gamecock and Bengals fan both today, that's a tough place to be. Texter from the 828 chimes in. Let's see what the 828 has to say today. They also traded the Panthers a lot to get that number one overall pick to miss on Young. Another person that I can think that was never drafted due to size was Chris Leak from Florida. Yeah, you know, it's just like you hear about guys and you see guys like Russell Wilson and Drew Brees who they're not as short as Bryce Young, but they're still relatively short compared to NFL standards. And they had good careers. So, like, it's just mind-boggling, man. Like, Texter, I agree with you, but, gosh, it's a tough place to be. Another texter from the 551 also agrees and echoes what the previous Tolo had to say and says what the Panthers gave up to trade for Bryce Young makes it a lot worse. Texter from the 205, Bryce Young needed to run the ball. That's what he did in college. That opens up the pass. Well, you know, running the ball in college is a lot different than running the ball in the NFL. You know, it's a lot different. So, you know, Carolina Panthers fans, I guess the last thing I'll say before we get back to South Carolina, I guess I would say if you're a Panthers fan, win what you can win, kind of to Tiger Powell Rachel's point a few minutes ago. Win what you can win now, but at the same time, like, if you do go get a few wins this year, great. Everybody likes to win. But big picture-wise, what do those wins do for you? I'm not saying tank. I'm not saying keep Bryce out there and just let him get demolished. But let's say, for example, the Panthers win 4 games this year with Andy Dalton. Okay, you win 4 games with Andy Dalton. Now, instead of the number 1 pick, you have the 4th pick. So now instead of getting Quinn Ewers, you're stuck with Shedeur Sanders. I'm not saying that in a literal sense, but what do those – I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I think Andy Dalton being the quarterback is the right decision for the Panthers. I'm just playing devil's advocate and saying, okay, well, if Bryce is benched and then he comes out and wins 3 or 4 games, all you're doing is dropping down and where you'd be to have that number 1 overall pick. And then what are you going to do? I'm not a tank guy. I'm not a normally I'm not a guy that says let's tank for Diesel came up with a great illustration last week. And I can't remember exactly what his Carson Beck phrase was, but tanking for Quinn Ewers. I mean, I don't hate it. Quinn Ewers is a heck of a quarterback. You don't have a quarterback. Not for the future, you don't. So, boy, is it a tough line to walk today for Panthers fans. All right, let's get back to Carolina, Shane Beamer. All right, I'll tell you this. Despite the loss on Saturday, despite South Carolina dropping that game to LSU, I'm here to tell you today that I think South Carolina has their guy. And I know I still have friends, I still have people that are South Carolina Gamecock fans that I talk to that don't like Shane Beamer. You're going to have that in any fan base. However, I do think Shane Beamer's the guy. I think Shane Beamer in year 4 is showing consistent growth year after year. Along the way, he's had upset wins. And along the way, he's had some very big upset wins. He's had wins over Tennessee, a blowout win, might you add. He's had wins over Clemson the very next week. This year, a very good win on the road at Kentucky. And you say, well, Cole, why is a win at Kentucky a very good win? Well, I'll tell you why. It's the SEC. It's the SEC. A road win in the SEC outside of it being in Nashville at Vandy is a good win. I don't care who it is. The SEC's a very tough league, and to go on the road in the SEC and win games, you'll take that all day long. It is a good win. So I'll tell you why I believe that Shane Beamer's the guy. When you look at his recruiting, I believe Shane Beamer has recruited very well. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, as there is with most coaches. 98% of coaches, there's room for improvement on the recruiting trail. I think Shane's recruited well. I think Shane Beamer embraces the fan base. And I think Shane Beamer has done a very good job of embracing that underdog mentality that you have to have at South Carolina, because let's be honest here, as a Gamecock, you're going to be the underdog. And just about every game you play outside of Old Dominion, outside of Akron, outside of a game against Vandy, for the majority of your life in the SEC, you're going to be an underdog. You have to have a guy that embraces that underdog mentality. And I think Shane Beamer does that well. I think he represents the university well. Is he Urban Meyer? Is he Nick Saban? Is he one of the greats is he Kirby Smart? No, he's definitely not. However, I do think that Shane Beamer, despite losing on Saturday, has shown enough that you have to keep this guy around, because good head coaches just don't grow on trees. They're just not found on every corner, every street corner out there. They're hard to find. And I do believe that Shane Beamer will only get better. When I've talked to Coach Beamer and when I've sat in those press conferences after his games, I can tell you one thing. That guy hates to lose. Shane Beamer absolutely hates to lose. Well, you say, Cole, every coach hates to lose. Yeah, you're right. They do. However, there's a difference in hating to lose versus hating to lose so much that you just have to do something about it. And I think that's what South Carolina has in Shane Beamer. I really do. I can see it. I can see the disdain that he has after a loss. I can see the fire and the emotion that Shane Beamer has. South Carolina lost on Saturday in front of an incredible environment, which was just electric, by the way. However, I'll tell you this, despite the loss to South Carolina or to LSU on Saturday, I think that was a win. I believe that was a win for the recruiting or for the recruits that were there in person. When you talk about recruiting, I think South Carolina showed up and showed out on Saturday to a young teenager, a high school kid who's there. They saw an incredible atmosphere. They saw a very large fan base show up. They saw a very passionate fan base show up, right? they saw South Carolina, who was not the more talented team on paper, go toe-to-toe with LSU. Those recruits saw South Carolina jump out fast. They saw Williams-Brice at its peak. And I mean, that play Saturday at times was unhinged. So despite the loss on Saturday, and again, this is not a moral victory for the Gamecocks. I'm telling you, when it comes to recruiting, I think it's a win. I think the recruits that were there saw enough that, man, this is a fun place to be when they're winning. When South Carolina's winning, and you can throw out, any team that wins, it's a fun place to be. However, my point is, I think Shane Beamer has done enough in the eyes of administration, as well as his athletic director, who I know is on the way out. But I believe Shane's the guy. Does Shane Beamer have flaws as a head coach? Sure. Is he perfect? No. He'll tell you that. However, I do believe South Carolina fans have to put their eggs in the basket of Shane Beamer, and I do believe that South Carolina fans have to buy in to what he's built in 4 years, and if Shane can use the portal and fill the gaps along the way, I don't see any reason that Shane Beamer can't be very, very successful at South Carolina. Am I saying that Shane Beamer is going to take South Carolina to a national championship? No. I'm not saying that. However, with an expanded playoff, I think Shane Beamer sees that. And I think that Shane Beamer knows what he has on this roster, a very good defense, a very deep defense, and some offense that has potential. Yeah, they still need work at receiver. Yeah, Nick Harbor is not living up to who Nick Harbor was supposed to be on the video game, right? However, going back to the portal, Beamer knows that he can fill in the gaps quickly with a few guys from the portal. It doesn't take long in college football nowadays to go fill in these gaps. When used to, it was about building a program and the next recruiting class. Well, now if Shane Beamer sees that he needs a dude at receiver, he can go get a dude at receiver thanks to the NIL and the transfer portal. I think Beamer's the guy. I believe that, and I believe that South Carolina, if they rally around Shane Beamer and don't give up on him, despite a loss to LSU on Saturday, I think that South Carolina Gamecock fans will see that you're in good hands with Shane Beamer. And, by the way, South Carolina is a very, very difficult place to win. A very difficult place to win, especially in the SEC. Not many coaches have done it. Not many. JB on the YouTube stream says, beat Akron this week, and that Ole Miss game on October 5th will probably be a night game at Willie B. JB also says, how many games in Georgia is Georgia going to lose? Bama, Texas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, ? Well, we'll get to that, JB. I don't know that they'll lose all of those. However, they definitely didn't look good on Saturday night against Kentucky. Not a good performance by the Bulldogs. We'll get to that and other games that happened in the college football world. But every Monday at 4:20, we talk to David Hood of TigerNet, the bye week. In the rearview mirror for the Clemson Tigers, we'll find out what David Hood thinks of NC State coming to town this Saturday night, next on the Fan Upstate. Every single Monday during football season, we talk a little Clemson Tigers football with the one, the only David Hood of TigerNet.com. David, we appreciate you joining us today. I say us, it's just me. I don't know why I said us. I'm by myself today. But how did David Hood spend his bye week weekend?
Watching a whole lot of football. As a Heisman voter, I take that very serious, and I try to watch as much football as I can. And sometimes, it's hard, and it goes into Sunday on Monday to try and catch up on all the games that I want to see and the players I want to see. When Clemson doesn't play, it makes it so much easier. I sit there with a remote in my hand and kind of watch everybody all at once and not all at once, and let my own cooking do the trick for me. Don't have to go anywhere or park. It's a good time.
David, I'm not sure what you can say or how much you can say, but as a Heisman voter, do you have a guy that you're really impressed with thus far in the season?
Well, obviously I was very impressed with Quinn Ewers. What he has done, as good as he has looked, kind of leading Texas out to that hot start. You have to look at him. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss has put up some incredible numbers. I think his completion percentage is like 83% for already 1,172 yards. Cam Ward at Miami has been really good. Eli Holstein at Pitt is a guy, the Alabama transfer. He's just a freshman that I've been impressed with. There's a lot of guys out there that, I'm kind of already taking a look at. You can't, not look at Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. There's that kid. I got a nice little package in the mail from them a couple of weeks ago on Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, the running back. I think he's going to be at 500 yards after this weekend. He's averaging over 10 yards a carry, and he has 9 touchdowns. 9. So, yeah, there's already a pretty good list of guys I'm already, watching fairly close, but watching a lot of people.
Now, David, I say this tongue in cheek, but where's DJU on your list?
Who?
right. DJ who?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just kind of taking a look at that, and you take a look at some of the preseason Player of the Year honors and all that. Here's an interesting tidbit for you. Cal football, the Cal Bears, are going to make their second cross-country trip in 3 weeks this weekend when they travel to Tallahassee. They've already traveled cross-country, and they beat Auburn on the Plains, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the preseason media polls and all that, Florida State got 81 first-place votes to win the ACC. Cal was picked 10th. Somebody voted for them twice. They got 2 first-place votes. At the end of this, and it's a pick'em right now. The bettors say it's a pick'em. They've got Florida State, I think, is a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. It's a pick'em, basically. At the end of this weekend, how about this? Cal could be 4-0, and Florida State could be 0-4.
Who had that on their bingo card, right? That's incredible.
Who had that on the bingo card? How much fun is that, though?
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. And, again, we'll get into Clemson. They were on a bye. But, David, man, look, as we're talking to David Hood of TigerNet.com, David, obviously we can crack jokes about it. But, when you just watch, we all saw glimpses, right, against Notre Dame of DJU at Florida while he was at Clemson. And then now at Florida State, bad doesn't even begin to describe. All of a sudden, the NFL conversations, those puppies are gone, right? So when you watch, what do you see that DJ's just not hitting the, or I guess, what do you see that DJ's missing the boat on?
Yeah, well, first of all, I see on a third down play where Mike Norvell calls a really, nice little kind of bootleg out, hit the running back in the flat. DJ hits him right in the chest, and he drops it on 3rd and 1. There's another play where he hits a wide receiver right in the hands on 3rd down, and he drops it. And I go, DJ's still making some throws. He's not getting a lot of help around him. I think Toa Feely had the longest run of the year, and that was that first touchdown drive in Ireland against Georgia Tech, 28 yards. That's the longest run that they've had this year. But with DJ, I go back to something I've said for a couple of years now. You see guys who come out and play the game. Look at Cade Klubnik. Loves to play the game of football. Just absolutely loves it. Take a look at a lot of different players and quarterbacks around the country. Look at Nussmeier from LSU this past weekend. Even when they were down 17-0, you think he wasn't having fun? You don't think that Lenore Sellers was having a really good time for South Carolina out there Saturday till he got hurt? I just have never thought that DJ really enjoyed playing the game of football. I just don't. I don't see that joy in playing the game out of him that you do in other players.
David Hood of TigerNet.com joins us every Monday at 4:20. David, I would assume that the biggest headline on this Monday going into game week for the Clemson Tigers coming off a bye is the news that freshman quarterback Cedric Bailey will start against Clemson as Grayson McCall is day-to-day.
Yeah, so C.J. Bailey, I thought he was okay in that win over La Tech. He kind of came out early. There was one pass on a third down where he really had a wide receiver open on the sidelines, and instead he, hit some old lady 9 rows deep in the stands. But once he kind of got over that, I think he was pretty good. And so he now makes his first ever start, his first career start in Death Valley. He's probably a little bit fortunate that it's noon and not at 7 or 8 o'clock. But, true dual threat guy, more so than Grayson McCall. And let's face it, Grayson McCall has been not good through the first couple of games for this NC State team, just not good at all. And Dave Doran says he's day-to-day, which, around here we hear day-to-day now, and that could mean season ending or could be day-to-day. Who knows? But we'll have to see what Bailey brings to the table out there Saturday.
David, when you talk about being day-to-day from a health standpoint, we know that when we talked to Dabo Swinney last week at almost 2 a.m. After the win over App State, there were some question marks about the health of Clemson's team, and I guess the bye came at a good time. What do you know about Clemson going into this game off of the bye health-wise?
Yeah, I think really the only player that you'll probably have a question about is Peter Woods. And when we talk to Dabo tomorrow, he will say Peter Woods is day to day. Kind of hearing that he didn't practice last week. No need to. You have to let that lower leg injury heal. And I think that if it was up to the doctors and the Clemson coaches, they would probably prefer to hold him this week and see if they can and let that leg heal even more, because you've got Stanford, which is, not a great team, not a good team coming up on homecoming. The next week, if they can somehow hold him, I think that's a plus. I don't know how he's feeling. I haven't heard. Maybe he's a go this week, but, just kind of basing off what I had heard after the injury, they'd probably love to be able to hold him at least another week.
Clemson attempting to earn its 800th all-time win on Saturday at noon, as David said, against NC State. David, do you feel as if a bye week can be a bad thing in terms of stopping or cooling off the momentum that we saw against App State?
Yeah, so they need to go out and kind of keep that aggressive mindset on offense. One of the things I would love to watch this week, going back, didn't see it a lot in the game or didn't notice it in the game, had to go back and rewatch it. App State never brought a lot of pressure. They did a lot of four-man front, four-man rush, dropped people, especially after that first 76-yard throw to Bryant Westco Jr. So Cade never really saw a lot of pressure. NC State's going to be a little bit of a different story. So for them, I think it's still going to be keep Cade comfortable, give him a clean pocket, keep that momentum going while still taking the shots downfield, because that's still the big question, right? Like, it was one game, not to dismiss App State, but NC State's going to have better athletes, and just see if they can keep it rolling. Is that going to be the new identity that this team maybe has found its spark offensively? Heard from people coming out of practice or out of the game the other night, this is what they saw in practice all through August. This is what they saw against Clemson's defense, even, that this offense was winning battles like that. And for whatever reason, Cade got spooked against Georgia, and it just didn't work out.
David Hood of TigerNet.com joining me on Wire to Wire, as he does on Mondays at 4:20. That line, 20.5. David, again, call me crazy. Tell me if you disagree. I didn't think when the season started that line would be 20.5. And as you said a minute ago, I thought you said it well, Grayson McCall just hasn't been what we thought he could have been at NC State. Obviously, he's battling injury. Are there any parts of this team, as you look at NC State and what they've done this year, is there anything that you see that could be cause for concern for Clemson on Saturday?
Yeah, one of the kids that really had a big game who camped at Clemson is Kevin Casey Concepcion, the sophomore wide receiver. He's already got 22 grabs for a couple of hundred yards and 3 TDs. And he's a guy that could cause some problems for Clemson. He's that kind of, quick scat guy who can make plays out in space. But once you kind of get past him, they've got another guy, that Justin Jolly, I think his name is. But other than that, those are really the only 2 wide receivers that they've got that are even in the top 50 in ACC statistics. And so they're not running the ball particularly well right now either. Their main rusher is Jordan Waters, that senior. He's only got 156 yards. There's just a lot of things that they are not doing well. But, Concepcion is one guy that I kind of take a look at it and I go, well, that's a guy that could hurt you.
David, it's fascinating. We've had a lot of Clemson fans over the past 2 to 3 weeks chiming in on our text line about the Georgia game and flushing it and moving forward. And, my question for you is if Clemson were to go out against NC State and do what they did against App State just 2 weeks ago, what will be 2 weeks when they play NC State, do you think Clemson fans and the fan base as a whole will be able to just flush that Georgia game and act like it didn't exist, or would you caution them to not do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of scar tissue there, and there's 3 years of scar tissue there, and I don't think anybody's going to flush it. It's going to have to be kind of a week-to-week thing for this team. They're going to have to prove it to everybody, I think, every week that they have indeed turned a corner. And I got a text really early this morning. In fact, it woke me up from somebody over there in the building, and it said, hey, we're really excited about the next 2 weeks in Death Valley. I think they see this as a huge opportunity for this program to get in front of a lot of people, to play on national television, to kind of say, hey, maybe we aren't what you saw against Georgia. Maybe we're back. But, it just kind of comes down to you have to go out and you have to do it. And then this schedule sets up really, really nice for them. Now that Florida State probably isn't what everybody thought that they were going to be, I don't think Wake Forest is very good. You kind of go, where does once you kind of get past this NC State game and they're 20, like you said, a 20-point favorite here, where is their next big game? Where is their next game that you go, wow, you really have to be careful there? Tony Elliott and Virginia come in October the 19th. Louisville, hey, there you go, November 2nd. There's that stretch of November. Clemson hosts Louisville. They go up on the mountain and play at Virginia Tech, and then they go to Pitt, which we've already talked about, 3-0. Pat Narduzzi. That November to remember might have to indeed be a November to remember for Clemson.
It certainly might be. David, my last question before I let you run, talking about the offensive output against App State, the records that were broken. Can Clemson fans, you nearly called it. You said the first play of the game, let's go to Bryant Wesco. Well, it was the third play of the game. Can Clemson fans now expect that to be the MO of getting the young guys involved early, kind of like they wanted to do against Georgia but didn't do?
I think so. I think everybody saw what Bryant Wesco can bring to the table, what Moore can bring to the table. But part of it, a lot of people aren't talking about. Now, you had some guys that people complained about in the wide receivers group. Hope they don't ever play again, blah, blah, blah. But you see TJ Moore go out and make a play, see Bryant Wesco making plays, and all of a sudden, Cole Turner, who quit on a route against Georgia and didn't play particularly well, he's going up and making a high-point catch against App State. Adam Randall's making a tough catch in traffic. All of a sudden, these older players going, hey, these kids are here to take our job, and there's more coming. You hear good things about Noble Johnson, who really hasn't played yet. Mason Kelly, Tink, he got out on the field some. There's more guys that are coming that are going to keep pushing these guys. And I think you're going to see this aggressiveness going forward. I really do.
David, great stuff as always. Sure to appreciate you hopping on with me, and we will see you Saturday night and talk to you again next Monday. That is David Hood of TigerNet.com. Always a fantastic interview. Appreciate him joining us, taking time out of his busy schedule. Listen, he's a Heisman voter, and taking time out of his schedule to join us each and every Monday at 4:20. One thing that we have not done yet, other than the Bryce Young conversation, we have not had a chance to go around the NFL Week 2 style and take a look at the biggest surprises of the weekend. We'll do that next.
keyword fan.
And connect with Diesel and Cole Bryson on Wire to Wire. This is the Fan Upstate.
Texter says, now that the Red Rocket is starting for the Panthers, maybe they can make an appearance on NFL Red Zone. Texter from the 205. That's good. I like it. Texter, I'm glad you said that, man. I bit the bullet yesterday. I bit the bullet and purchased NFL Red Zone and Sunday Ticket because they sell it as a package, right, as they do everything nowadays. So I bit the bullet, and, man, I don't know why. I know that Red Zone's the best thing in the world, but the last few years I haven't had it. And I'll tell you this, NFL Red Zone, there's nothing better. There's no TV production that even compares to NFL Red Zone. Now, to your point, Texter from the 205, my team or the Panthers, nor the Panthers, should I say, were on NFL Red Zone much yesterday. I'm a Cowboys fan, and, they were not found anywhere near NFL Red Zone yesterday, nor were the Carolina Panthers. So it was a rough day, for the Panther faithful, as well as the Cowboy fans like me that have to endure that kind of pain week in and week out, or every other week, rather. But that's a funny text. Maybe the Red Rocket can get them to appear in the red zone. We'll see. And speaking of the NFL, we go around the NFL Week 2 edition. My Cowboys, man, 44-19. The New Orleans Saints, either they've played two bad teams or they're really good. I don't know which, but they've scored 44 points, or they scored 44 points yesterday, and it pains me to say because, it's Rob Brown's team, and Rob Brown's team just absolutely put an old-fashioned butt-whooping on my team yesterday. Dak Prescott wasn't good. Boy, Alvin Kamara, he was really good. Dallas's defense, did Mike Zimmer just forget how to coach for a game? Not really sure what happened there, but that was a bad game, and not a good game if you're a Cowboys fan. And, again, going back to the New Orleans standpoint, New Orleans may be legit. I don't know if they're a legit contender in the NFC or not, but goodness gracious, you talk about scoring nearly 100 points in 2 games. And, again, I know the first game was against the Carolina Panthers, but a bad day for Mike Zimmer and them boys. And speaking of them boys, Dale chimes in on the renewal by Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone. Dale, did you have to suffer through the same thing that I did yesterday with the Cowboys?
When I saw at the 10-minute mark of the second quarter and the Cowboys had 14 minutes time of possession to the Saints 6, and they were up 21-6, I knew it was going to be a bad day.
How does that even happen, though? Does Mike Zimmer just forget how to freaking coach?
No, it's blown coverages. There's players. But I will tell you this. As much as that was on the defense, that was very much also on Dak Prescott. And $240 million doesn't go as far as I thought it would.
It only lasted 1 week, Dale.
We had this conversation. I told you the man was not worth it.
Oh, come on. One bad game.
Oh, he's good for that. You'll have another one like this. I promise you. I promise you. And look, I am a Cowboys fan. He frustrates me so freaking much, man. 2 picks and a fumble. And any sort of life that we had as soon as Derek Carr threw that pick, he just gave it right back. Said, no, I don't want the ball. Come on, man.
It's a bad day.
Come on.
It's a bad day. I'm with you. Listen, the bad part is, Dale, I have become so used to this, it doesn't even, faze me anymore.
Man, look, and the running game was decent. I mean, Zeke looked like, not rookie Zeke, but dang near close.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad, but again, you're right. Blown coverages. Trayvon Diggs and those guys yesterday just looked lost. So we'll see, man. We're going to have another tough test. The Ravens coming to Jerry. Or is
I got one question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. What are we going to do without Ferguson? Schoonmaker played okay. I really think we probably need to jump in and see if we can get another receiver outside of Brandon Cooks.
It's a great question. Appreciate the call, Dale. I'll tell you this, man. Ferguson not being there, it is detrimental. Dak Prescott's always needed a safety valve. When he started his NFL career, he had Jason Witten. And, Jason Witten obviously was on the back end of his career. But, no, he does need a safety valve. It's just like that receiving core outside of CeeDee Lamb. And, again, back to the conversation we had last week, Dale, when you pay everybody, you don't have a lot of room to go out and add guys to the receiving core, not to mention CeeDee Lamb's taking up a pretty big chunk of that payroll as well. So appreciate the call, Dale. I understand the frustration. It is going to be another tough year for the Cowboys because this is what we do. We get hyped up after 1 year, and the next week we, get kicked right in the you-know-what. How about the Buccaneers and Lions yesterday? Just a game that surprised the heck out of me, 20-16, Tampa Bay over Detroit. Are we sleeping on Baker Mayfield? Are we sleeping on Tampa Bay? I mean, Baker Mayfield, guys, for now 2 years has shown us that pretty good. He's pretty good. Texter says, how is Bryce Young shocked he got benched? This to me screams, I'm a 5-star and I came to play, not be benched. Yeah, it's not a good look, but he's not playing well. He shouldn't be surprised, to your point, Texter. David P. in Spartanburg says, isn't Dalton the red rifle? He's the red something. Red rocket, red rifle, whatever you want to call it. Texter from the 344, the Saints haven't the Saints haven't punted all year until garbage time yesterday in the fourth quarter. No one saw this offense coming. I have to agree with it. Have to agree with you there, Texter. The Saints right now, to your point about not having punted, they're on a tear right now. I don't know that will last, but they're on an absolute tear. 615 says, as a Cowboys fan, my only consultation is that I had Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is a beast, man. Alvin Kamara is a beast. I don't know. You had him on fantasy, I guess is what you meant, right? I guess that means you had him on fantasy. If you did, congratulations to you. Look, he's a next-level running back. That's a pretty good consolation to have, Texter. But I would rather have the Cowboys, your team, my team, win rather than your fantasy running back and Alvin Kamara have a good day. I hate to tell you, but I choose my team over fantasy all day long. It is what it is. It's the Cowboys fan. This is the life we chose, right? All right, 5 o'clock coming up next. Upset picks. Where do you stand after last weekend? Also, Overreaction Monday. What's your overreaction? Text now 71307. Start your text with the word fan.
talk from start to finish. You're going wire to wire. With Diesel and Cole Bryson. On the Fan Upstate.
It is Overreaction Monday. What does that mean? It's time to overreact to what you saw this past weekend. Get your overreaction now, or get your overreaction in right now, rather, on the text line 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Again, that's 71307, keyword fan. Overreaction. I've got a couple overreactions. What are yours? What are your overreactions from the weekend? It can be college, it can be pro, it can be high school, whatever you want it to be. Phone lines also open as well. 844-FAN-PHONE, 844-326-3663. That's the way you can call into the program if you want to get your overreaction in. That way you can do so. While the overreactions start to pile in, we have to do something that we haven't done today. I can't believe you Tolos. I cannot believe you Tolos have let me get through the day without getting to the upset picks. I know we talked a lot of Gamecocks. We talked about Bryce Young, but we hadn't even gotten to the upset picks yet. And I know you're wondering, hey, what do we do? How do we do? Well, I'm glad you asked. If you didn't know, you can follow the Fan Upstate on Twitter at the Fan Upstate. That is where you can see the current standings for the Upset Picks Challenge brought to you by Ingles Markets. You can give me a follow on Twitter or X as well at the Cole Bryson. That's where I am. But when you look at the upset picks, man, I don't know how you did this weekend. Let me know, 71307, keyword fan. Also on the YouTube stream. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Over 100 watching there right now. I did not have a good weekend. My upset pick was not good. In fact, it wasn't even close. I took Middle Tennessee over the weekend to upset Western Kentucky. And I believe it was a 7-point spread in favor of Western Kentucky. And Western Kentucky won the game 49-21. So my upset pick, didn't work out well. Did not work out well at all for me. I thought about going Gamecocks. Obviously, that one wouldn't have worked out either. But let's see. Let's go to the Upset Picks Challenge leaderboard, the standings, if you will. And still at the top. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he's gotten 34.5 points. But Amazon guy still at the top of the Upset Picks Challenge. When you look at the standings, Josh Pate is in second with 32.5 points. So there are no ties for first or second. There is a tie for third right now. Big shout out to JT and Greer, as well as the Twisted Whisker, who are tied at third with 22.5 points. At fifth, Coach AJ, 19.5. A tie for sixth, John Dog and Mike Main, 18.5 points there. Ty Duncan at 8, 17.5 picks is what Ty Duncan has. Buckeye Brian coming in at 9th with 16 points on the year. There is a tie at 10. Sparty Party 12 and Brandon and Spartanburg both tied at 15.5 points. Jake Crane, 15 points as well. Fred Savage has 14. Noel has 14. Sheezy has 13.5. Maze and Brew, 12.5. Notre Dame Nate and Greenville Gamecock are both tied at 12. Let's see here. Our celebrity picks, a couple of those. I'm going to skip those and get to the Tolos because you Tolos are the only ones that matter. Brian Andrews, Wesley Roberts, E. Thotty, and Shane Barrett all tied at 19 with 11.5 points. Shane Connick, our weekly guest with the Charlotte Observer, he's at 26th with 11 points. Keith and TR, 10.5 points for Keith and TR. John Corley at 28th with 9.5. And there is a tie for 29th between myself and Diddy. How about it, Diddy? Diddy, man, we're at the bottom, but we're on the board, buddy. That's all that matters. Diddy and I both have 9 points on the season. We were at 10, but because we lost that one, we fell, or because we lost this past week, we fell and dropped a point. So those are the standings. Now, if you didn't hear your name, there are others on the board, but those are that's a long list. So I read the top 30 on air. The others on the list or on the board, I'm not going to read through all of them and bore you all to death, but there are others on the board, however, not inside the top 30. I'm telling you, man, this Upset Picks Challenge, it is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. I've hit once, and it was South Carolina over Kentucky. And, man, I'll tell you this, it is a difficult challenge. If you have not entered yet and you're wondering how to get involved, we're going to the call because we have Tom, who I see has chimed in on the Renewal by Anderson, the Carolinas fan phone. We're going to get to Tom. I'm sure he's has one or two things to say about Saturday's loss in Columbia. But if you haven't entered yet on the Upset Picks Challenge, you can do so by texting 71307. Start your text with the word fan. The Upset Picks Challenge opens every Wednesday at 4 p.m. and it goes through Friday. However, it's not just 24/7. It's only show hours. So 4 to 7 on Wednesday, 3 to 7 on Thursday, 3 to 7 on Friday. What you're doing is you're taking a betting underdog to outright win the game. So, for example, South Carolina, if you took them last weekend over LSU, you would need them to win the game, not cover the spread, but win the game. If they did, that's how many points you would get that week for your win. However, it is tougher than it seems, man. This challenge is not for the faint of heart. It is a tough challenge. And a big, big thanks to Ingles Markets for being the proud sponsor of this year's Upset Picks Challenge. We have several texts that have come in on the text line in the last few minutes. We'll get to those in just a few moments from now. But we go to the phone lines. Renewal by Anderson, the Carolinas fan phone, 844-FAN-PHONE. That's 844-326-3663, where Tom wants to chime in. Tom, what's up, man?
Cole, I watched a lot of football in my life, and I'll say this, that was the worst performance I have ever seen from a group of zebras. How in the world do those people sit here today on a Monday and have a job? I don't know how in the world someone said, you know what, this group right here deserves to be an official in the best conference in college football. I've been trying to think of that answer all weekend, and I can't. But as painful as it is to admit that they were wrong, which they were, we also are at fault here too. I mean, there's a lot looking back on that game where, as a fan, I see this and I say, well, yeah, the call could have changed, and it should have. I mean, this is one of the few times where I will ever blame an official. But at the same time, looking back on it, South Carolina was very undisciplined at times in the game. And I'll also say this. I don't know if you got to see what Beamer said at halftime, but watching that, I felt like the game was over just by his reaction. And as a coach, you got to find a way to reject that energy that they had in the first quarter. And, I'm still very high on this team. This team can still win 9 games, which I said they would before they beat Kentucky. This team can still win 9 games because that offense that we saw in the first half of the LSU game is a good offense. They were able to run the ball for 243 yards on Saturday. That is a good thing. Now, defensively, like you said earlier in the show, everybody who understands football knew LSU was going to come back. It was going to happen. I thought the tackling was very poor on Saturday. Very poor on Saturday. But you know what? It's a new week. Okay, it's a new week. We're talking about it. But more importantly, there's a golden opportunity to get to 3-1 on Saturday night. And as a fan,
That's all you can ask for is just move on. We lost. It sucked. But it's time to move on and get ready to beat the absolute tar out of Akron.
Ooh, I didn't know where that was going for a second.
Yeah, you do that, you're 3-1 with another golden opportunity, and I mean golden opportunity. Really, the whole month of October is a golden opportunity, Cole. The whole month is.
Okay, I'll push back on the 9 wins. I don't see any way and where that happens. However, I do like your excitement. Listen, I'm with you. I do think the refs were atrocious. I understand your frustration with Gamecocks being undisciplined, 13 penalties, 100-plus yards, too many. However, Tom, I will say, those penalties that you talk about, I mean, you can go back and you and I can sit down and watch that offensive pass interference call until the cows come home, and we will not be able to find offensive pass interference in that call specifically.
I don't know what they saw. I don't know what they saw for most of the game. But that was it. That was worse than the horse collar BS. That was worse than the second pick six being called back. You said it earlier, and that was by far the worst call of the game.
Yeah.
The worst call of the game. But I will say, and I think most Carolina fans will agree, when you got 11 seconds and a timeout in your pocket, you try to get closer. That's the one thing I wish that Beamer would have done differently in that game was if you did have a timeout, it makes sense. It makes sense to kick it there. But you still had a timeout. And they should have done something different other than kick it there on third down with a timeout.
Well, Tom, before you go, Tom, I've asked our Tolos for their overreaction. It is Overreaction Monday, every Monday at 5 o'clock during football season. What is your overreaction for the weekend?
Rocket Sanders is the best running back in the SEC.
Hey, I like it. Thanks for the call, Tom. 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. That's how you can let your voice be heard. Gamecock fans, I don't know where your head's at. We talked about it to open the show today. A brutal, brutal loss for the Gamecocks on Saturday. Not just in the performance, but in the way the officiating went. I know a lot of Clemson fans that watch the game with an agenda are going to push back. But just like Tom said, man, it's a new week. You flush it. I said it earlier. I think South Carolina can use this and learn how to win, grow from it, and not make those same mistakes that they made. And, LSU against USC or against Southern Cal, rather, in the very first week of the season. They did not finish. However, they did this past week. They did finish in Columbia, even with some assist from the officials. Tom, again, you'll go back. I'll let you hear what Tom said. It is a new week. Gamecock fans, do you agree or disagree?
But you know what? It's a new week, okay? It's a new week. We're talking about it. But more importantly, there's a golden opportunity to get to 3-1 on Saturday night.
There's Tom. What do you think, Gamecock fans? 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. Also looking for your overreactions. If you have that, it's Overreaction Monday. Whatever you saw this weekend, you know how fans are, man. They're knee-jerk. They overreact. That's what fans do. And I want to hear your overreactions. We've had a few come in on the text line, 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Again, that's 71307, keyword fan. Before we get to the text, let's go right back to the phones. I am by myself today, caller, so if you will, let me know your name when we bring you on. You are on the air, caller. What's up?
Right back to the phones. I am by myself today, callers.
Caller, can you turn your radio down, please?
Yeah, Trip, Jarrett.
All right, you're on the air. What's up?
Yeah, hey man, I was at the game Saturday, and let me tell you, that was a great atmosphere the whole time. I was there at 5:30 that morning. Don't know why, but let me tell you, that was one of the most heartbreaking losses I've ever experienced, and I've been to a ton of games. But I think I was there 30 minutes after the game ended, and
just sat there and just tried to take it in. But yeah, but I tell you, that offensive pass interference call was probably the worst I've ever seen.
It was. It was. And you know what, man? You have the right to be upset. You know, you have the right, Jared. It was a bad call, and South Carolina fans, I think they're with you. It was a very, very bad call.
Absolutely. And I don't know why they called it on Mazio, because I don't think he was engaged in it at all.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you're talking about on the other route, right? It was a long pass, but then Mazio's route was kind of like a curl route, if you will. And I believe that's what you're referring to, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Jared, appreciate the call, man.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663 is how you can get in on the text line. All right, let's see here. Texter says also another overreaction is DB is never allowed to deliver a football team to Columbia ever again. I like that, Texter. I really like that one a lot. I believe you're right. JB may be banned by the Gamecock fans. If you don't know what we're talking about, DB, I said JB, I apologize. DB, one of our Tolos, is a pilot for a big a large airline company, and his assignment was the LSU Tigers. So our Tolo, our guy DB, who helps out with the Upset Picks Challenge, he was the one that flew LSU to Columbia and flew them back. So they may not want DB flying again. Let's see. Texter says, this is Sheezy, says, my overreaction, the Saints are going to the Super Bowl. How about those Cowboys, Cole? Who dat? The Saints fans are coming at me hard today. Another texter, 828, says, how about them Cowboys? I like it. I like it. Look, I'm going to dish it out when we win, so I expect you to do the same. Texter from the 349. Overreactions are Gamecocks are a 10-win team if Sellers and defense stays healthy. Saints should be the favorite to win the Super Bowl. Those would definitely be good overreactions, Texter. I like it. That's the point of the overreactions. P1 Pollywog chimes in on the text line, 71307, says, I can see Miami going undefeated this season, knocking off Clemson, the ACC championship. Texter says, my biggest issue with the refs is they couldn't get the freaking numbers right all game. They called penalties on people who weren't even on the field, says a texter. This one's bad, texter. Should I read this? Who's this from? 491. 491 chimes in and says, my overreaction, Burns is going 0-10. Text. Bad texter, but funny. Another tough loss last week for Burns, now 0-3. But you're right. It's overreaction Monday. And I like it. Burns going over 0-10. I don't think it'll happen, Texter, but it's a tough year for Burns. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a long season, I believe, and we'll see how many they get. But they're in a tough region, so it's not going to get any easier. All right, you can continue to get your overreactions. Let's see. Did I miss any on the stream? What's Madcraft doing? Madcraft says Miami has the best defensive front in college football, held their opponent to 6 rushing yards. And Chargers are going to play boring old school football and make the playoffs in Harbaugh first year. I like that. Madcraft, I actually don't think that the second one with the Chargers is the biggest overreaction. I think they are a playoff team. I really do. Tough division, but I think they're a playoff team. Bo on the text line says, overreaction. Panthers will go undefeated the rest of the season. Get hyped. Behind the red rifle, Andy Dalton. Bo, I love you, but I don't think that's going to happen. Sorry about it, but look, he's an upgrade. Andy Dalton's an upgrade, but I don't know that you get that many more wins. Maybe 3, maybe 4. We shall see. All right, we're going to continue the Gamecock conversation. Jack Veltri, friend of the program who was at the game. He is with Gamecock Central. We'll get his thoughts on what he saw in Columbia next.
Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
A lot of conversation about the South Carolina Gamecocks, as we all know what happened in Columbia Saturday. You watched it. I watched it. I was there. Jack Veltri was there, our next guest right here on Wire to Wire on the Fan Upstate. Jack, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, Cole. Hope you're doing well, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Look, I'm by myself. I'm riding solo today, but, in terms of the content, it's an easy day to ride solo. You watched a game on Saturday that will be remembered as one of the most difficult games to digest for Gamecock fans in quite some time. Now that you've had a few nights to sleep on it and kind of chew on what you saw Saturday, what's the biggest takeaway that Jack Veltri has?
Well, I think for starters, they should have won this game. It's pretty plain and simple, man. You have a 17-0 lead early in that game. You're playing super well in all three phases. Your offense is rolling. Your defense is forcing good pressure, and you get some beamer ball in there with the Maurice Brown blocked punt, but you couldn't do anything really to, build off of that. And that's the disappointing part, is not the penalties and stuff, which obviously had an impact on the game because it wiped so many points off the board. But, from what South Carolina needed to do, they couldn't get it done in terms of finishing off the Tigers. And that's probably the biggest takeaway I have.
It's fascinating when you look at all the factors, and that's what I led the show with today. I said, look, multiple things can be true, to your point. There are several factors that went in. However, and I want to see if you agree or disagree with me here, I felt like even as big as the penalties were, the biggest factor in the game looking different in the second half was the fact that Lenora Settlers wasn't the QB1 for the Gamecocks.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. I think anyone you talk to about that would probably have to say the same thing. I mean, it made a major difference in the way South Carolina's offense operated because, look, Robbie Ashford, I think, has similar attributes to Lenora Sellers in the fact that he's a big, kind of mobile quarterback that can definitely move. But I think the biggest difference between the two of them that we saw on Saturday is Sellers, obviously in the first game of the year, he struggled to throw the football, but over the last 2 weeks, and especially in that first half against LSU, he was throwing the ball really well. With Ashford, Carolina only threw 4 passes with him, and I think on 6 of the other pass attempts that he would have had, he scrambled. So I think that's the main thing, is that you saw Robbie throw the ball sometimes in that fourth quarter, but it felt kind of late and, not as productive as what a Lenora Sellers offense would be, because in that first half they were cruising and they put up 24 points on the board and only 9 in the second half. So there's your difference right there.
Jack Veltri of Gamecock Central joining us right here on the Fan Upstate. Jack, when you look at the calls that South Carolina fans will conversate about for quite some time, the one that, you have the horse collar and the 2 defensive touchdowns for South Carolina that came back. The one for me, though, the offensive pass interference on the pass from Robbie Ashford, that's the one that I cannot wrap my head around. Of the bad calls, there are plenty to choose from. Which would you say was the worst on Saturday?
Yeah, are you talking about the one on that was called on Mazio Bennett there?
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, are you calling it on a different receiver, or did you get the receiver's number wrong? Because I've heard 2 different things there.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. I think that happened twice in the game, where I think earlier on they called, offensive pass interference on, I think it was supposed to be on Nick Harbor, but they called it on number 1, which is Robbie Ashford, who wasn't even on the field at the time in the first half. So that made no sense. And I'm watching the play there. I'm like, Harbor pushed a little bit in the back, but it wasn't like anything like that I felt was like true pass interference. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. But yeah, later in the game, man, I think the biggest penalty for me, the Mazio one made no sense to me, because I'm like looking at it, I'm like, what? But I think the big one, there's the 3 Kyle Kennard penalties that had the huge impacts in the game. I think the one where he knocked down the quarterback for unnecessary roughness on the pick 6, the second one that is, was kind of I don't know how to feel about that call. The one you can control, and this one led to the go-ahead touchdown for LSU the second time around, was the offsides call on Kennard. It's 4th and 3, and you jump offsides. That just shows a little bit of lack of discipline. That's an older guy we're talking about, an experienced player. and you can't stay away from jumping off sides. That that was disappointing to see, in my opinion.
Jack, where do you stand on whether it's the offense or the defense? One thing that I've heard from a lot of Gamecock fans is, they went conservative. After they got the lead, they went conservative. I said earlier on the air today that, look, when your QB1 goes down, yeah, it's going to throw a wrench in your game plan. Every single team in America, unless Arch Manning's the backup, is going to have that same issue. Do you feel as if the coaching changes were an issue in terms of the odd man front a little bit for the Gamecocks in the second quarter? LSU started to impose their will a little bit. Do you feel like some of the offense and defensive schemes were a little conservative?
Yeah, I think the defensive scheme changing was a little odd to me. Not in the fact that it was conservative, but it was just, I think they maybe, they had like a 4-man front to begin with. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think they had a 4-man front to begin with. And then they moved into a 3-man front, which I thought was kind of weird. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, maybe something that Clayton White was – we'll find out later this week why. But I think that was a little strange to me because why go away from what was working? But that's just my opinion. Offensively, look, they're not – I mean, look, they said that they didn't play conservative in the second half, but in my opinion, they were running the football a lot more, which tells me that they had some sort of lack of confidence in Robbie Ashford's passing ability. I don't know why that is, because when he did throw the football, it was fine. I mean, it wasn't anything great, but you could definitely tell that they were leaning on the run game a bit. And look, without Lenore Sellers operating in this offense and sitting on the sideline, it makes such a big difference. And I think as the season goes along, and if he stays healthy, this offense is only going to continue to grow. And I did see a lot of positive signs when he was out there, but you could definitely tell once Ashford was in, it was kind of a little bit of a struggle.
Jack, do you guys in the day-to-day media get to talk to the coordinators, like, for example, get to ask Clayton White about that, what we were just talking about, switching from a 4-man front to an odd-man front?
Yeah, so the way the schedule works is we'll talk to players tomorrow, and then we'll talk to Shane Beamer right after that. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk to Dowell Loggins and Clayton White. So, yeah, there's a good opportunity each week to kind of ask about some of the things that happen, and this week should especially be interesting.
Jack Veltri, Gamecock Central, joining us. Jack, I said it earlier, man, it's a loss. Nobody likes to lose, but a ton to take away, a ton of positives, in my opinion, to take away from that game, the atmosphere, from a recruiting standpoint. I don't know what your thoughts are on how recruits view wins and losses, but I said earlier in the show, and I want to see where you're leaning here. From a recruiting standpoint, despite the loss, I still feel like it was a win for the Gamecocks on Saturday.
I feel that way too, man. I think, look, I don't know how recruits feel about wins and losses either, to be honest. I don't really know how much of an impact it has. Obviously, you look at the matchup, it's kind of like LSU obviously has much more talent than South Carolina, and they're the bigger, more perennial program. But I feel like Carolina held its own on Saturday. I mean, they played very well. They put on a good show in front of a national audience, and I think that's worth something, is that the fact that they sold that place out, and I mean, it was a really good atmosphere, and I think the recruits, that's something they want to be a part of, playing in front of people that really care about college football. And I think you have to give credit to this fan base for putting on a really good display on Saturday, despite the losing outcome.
Have we heard anything as of yet? I mean, it's just Monday at 5:33 in the evening, but in terms of the health of Lenore Sellers, Jack?
Yeah, so we heard from Shane Beamer yesterday in his teleconference, and he said Sellers is doing okay. And, I mean, the team depth chart just came out earlier today, and he's listed as QB1. So I think everyone expected Lenore's to be fine and good to go for Saturday. Obviously, I think he'll play based on the way things are looking. But I think because it's Akron and stuff, you don't want him playing all 4 quarters. So you hope to get the lead to a point where you can put Robbie Ashford in, and you can kind of work on some of the kinks that maybe him and the offense had in that second half the other day.
Jack Veltri, Gamecock Central. Jack, LSU was a game that a lot of people before the season already had chalked up as a loss. So South Carolina Gamecock fans, if you asked them, hey, you start the season 2-1, I believe most of them would have taken that. Akron, you assume you're going to win that one, you'll be 3-1. And Gamecock fans, in my opinion, would take a 3-1 start all day long. Do you feel as if that this team, we saw LSU against Southern Cal, They didn't get it done in that first game, and then they did finish in terms of the fourth quarter on Saturday. Do you feel that if you look at South Carolina now, Jack, that it's now the Gamecocks' turn, if you will, to do that growing up and be able to win whatever game it is on the schedule coming up to be able to win that next big game?
Yeah, I think what we learned on Saturday is this team is very good. I just think they are not there yet in terms of that next step of finishing against these bigger, badder team or, bigger or powerful teams, if you know what I mean. We've seen it before. We saw last year where they had the 14-30 lead against Georgia at halftime in Athens. They couldn't close that game out. They should have beaten a decently mediocre Florida team last year that they had a 10-point lead on in the fourth quarter against. They didn't finish that game. It's kind of the same case here where they're, kind of going through the cycle of, okay, they're jumping out to a big lead. They can't close it out. So that's the next step for them. But do not get it twisted. They are a good team this season. It is much more enjoyable to watch this team play out on the field this year. I think they have a really strong defense. Special teams has been pretty good. And then offensively, I think they're only continuing to get better each week. So I'm excited to see what happens against Akron this week. Obviously, they should win. But it's going to be a nice reset button to kind of work out all the mistakes they made against LSU and then go into the bye week before having a huge matchup at home against Ole Miss in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one, and it'll be interesting to see where they flex it if they do, in terms of making it a night game. Hey, big picture question, Jack. Nick Harbor, not the video game Nick Harbor that a lot of people thought would be in 2024. What's going on with Nick Harbor? I think he had 2 receptions on Saturday off the top of my head without looking, but just not the start that Gamecock fans would have liked. He didn't have spring practice. I don't know if that, in your opinion, goes into effect when talking about his production or lack thereof, but just not the guy thus far they thought they had.
Yeah, and look, the video game did nothing to really help him. I mean, if anything, it set the bar way too high for him. And look, Nick's an awesome kid, and I think he is a great athlete, but that's what he is. He's an athlete. And you got to remember, I keep saying this over and over again, talking about Nick, he came out of high school as a 5-star athlete, not a 5-star wide receiver, because that's a position he didn't really play at all in high school. So I think with Nick, it's good to see that he got involved on Saturday. I mean, he had a 17-yard catch, and then he had a 1-yard catch to finish with 2 catches for 18 yards. But, I mean, it really hasn't lived up to the billing that many people expected out of him. Then again, this is a guy that we knew in the offseason and in camp. I mean, he wasn't at spring practice, he was doing track. And then he's working on his ball catching and stuff, which had been an issue for him. So I think it still is. I mean, he's, juggling some, passes to catch and stuff. And it's not all there yet for him. So I'm not sure eventually when it's going to happen or when it's going to click, but it's not as simple as, just go run a go route and have Lenoris throw him a deep ball or run a jet sweep with him. There's a lot more that goes into it than just, it's not the video game, right? So that's something you really have to take into account with a guy that is still trying to figure it out as a wide receiver.
Jack, before we let you go, a texter says first, love Jack's accent. I've got to know, where is Jack from?
I am. So I appreciate it. I'm originally from New York, but I haven't lived there in quite some time. I moved to Fort Mill, South Carolina back when I was like 2011 maybe. So I've been in the South for quite a few years now. I guess the accent still remains.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's a good thing though. It allows you to remember who was talking. The guy with the New York accent. Jack, great stuff as always. We appreciate you, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cole. Really appreciate it, man.
That's Jack Veltri with Gamecock Central. He was there Saturday, as was I, South Carolina LSU. Jack does a fantastic job for Gamecock Central. Appreciate him hopping on with us. He tells you, texter, it was the New York accent. There you go. Texter, really? You couldn't tell? You had to ask? I think everybody knows that was a New York accent, right? All right, we'll look at the biggest games and results from the college football weekend. Which game surprised you the most? Next.
Tapping out on this show, you either bring it strong strong or you can ride the pine.
We're going wire to wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
Mike Sennett with your sports flash on the Fan Upstate. Three-time Pro Bowler Andy Dalton will get the started quarterback.
Your biggest takeaways from the college football weekend. There were some good games, and you Tolos may have a good takeaway. You may have a game that you thought was a good game, but I don't know that anybody, outside of the South Carolina LSU game, which was a really good game, can anybody answer this question? Which game surprised you the most without giving the answer Georgia, Kentucky? Are you kidding me? Saturday night, I get home, turn the TV on. It's late. What was that, a 7:30 kick? Something like that. And I turn the TV on, and Kentucky, Georgia, below 10 points, something like that. I think it was 3 points in the first quarter, and then 3 more from each team. Was it 6-3 at the half? Kentucky leading Georgia. Just a shocker in the SEC. So did Georgia just have a bad game? What else can you put it on? Not a great day for Carson Beck. And look, things happen. It's the SEC. It's college football. You don't show up and have a great game every single weekend in college football. But, man, Georgia 13-12 over Kentucky. I don't think anybody thought that would be the score when you look at that game over the weekend. Very surprising there. Texas, top 2 team, now number 1. No surprise that they absolutely rolled UTSA. But I will say this, talking about the top 5, Alabama, the South Florida-Alabama game 2 weeks ago, South Florida played them really well. Bama kind of struggled. And then the fourth quarter, Bama blew it open, right? The fourth quarter, the score, if you will, wasn't very indicative of how that game went. However, Alabama-Wisconsin, while Wisconsin's not an elite team, I was looking at this game as a very important game in terms of how Bama came out and how they would respond after being a little shaky, being a little vulnerable the week prior against South Florida, but Alabama just absolutely crushing Wisconsin, and a lot of it on the ground. Look, Milroe had 5 touchdowns. Bama ripped Wisconsin 42-10. The Badgers quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, got injured during the game. It wouldn't have mattered anyways. Bama was going to roll them. I thought that was a very telling win for Alabama in the sense of, when they were losing or when they were barely beating South Florida 2 weeks prior, a lot of people, a lot of Alabama fans even, thought that, oh, man, this Kalen DeBoer, I don't know that this was the right hire, right? However, look, just like Georgia, Kentucky, teams are going to have off days. Alabama had 3 off quarters against a halfway decent South Florida team, went on to blow them out in the fourth quarter, and they come back and absolutely beat the brakes off of Wisconsin. I said it during the offseason, and I'll say it again. Bama hadn't gone anywhere. Alabama is not the team that you're going to see regress. Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. Our team's going to play up to him because it's Alabama. Sure, that happens every week in college football. However, you're not going to see Bama drop off. Yeah, they play a gauntlet schedule, but you're not going to see those guys drop off. They're not going anywhere. I got bad news for you, SEC. Bama is not going anywhere anytime soon. Ole Miss looked really good over the weekend. I thought they had a dominating win over Wake Forest, who's not good, let's be honest. A lot of people are going to beat Wake Forest 40-6 this year. Boston College, Missouri. That was a game that Diesel and I talked about. And by the way, Diesel's out today. He'll be back tomorrow. Diesel and I talked about this game last week several times. Upset picks challenge. I almost took this game, and boy, did it turn out to be one of the better games of the day. Look, Boston College is a good team. Missouri's a good team in a conference, a tough SEC, in a tough conference in the SEC. However, Missouri's schedule, it doesn't have the same teams on it that Florida's does, or even a South Carolina schedule does. Missouri's a good team. However, they're going to win a lot of games this year, and you're going to think, oh, maybe they're better than we think. I just don't buy it. I think they're a good team. I don't know that they're top 5. They did beat Boston College 27-21. Boston College gave them a pretty good scare. It's just, at the end of the day, they don't have the toughest schedule. And then how about Miami? I know Madcraft will stand up in the stream and start waving his Miami flag. A huge win, 62-0 over Ball State. Cam Ward's the real deal. He had like 904 touchdowns on Saturday against Ball State. He's the real deal. I have to admit, I might have been a little off on Cam Ward. So far, he looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Notre Dame had no problem getting rid of that NIU disgust. They obliterated Purdue 66-7. Let's see. What else? Memphis. Oh, yeah. Nobody's talking about this game, are they? Nobody's talking about Memphis and Florida State. Florida State, ladies and gentlemen, 0-3. They've lost 2 home games this year. And you know what? Sometimes in sports we overreact. Sometimes in sports we say the sky's falling. And it's an overreaction. We shouldn't do that. However, in this case, in this instance, and in this scenario, the sky's falling. Florida State, I'll just say it, sucks. They're terrible. I tweeted it out on Saturday at the Cole Bryson. You can follow me there if you haven't done so already. Does Mike Norvell know that you can put DJU on the bench? I mean, Sam Hennigan's a good quarterback for Memphis. They're 3-0, by the way, 20-12 win over Florida State. But still, like, what is this dude? I'm really trying not to be disrespectful to DJU. But what's this dude even still as a starter doing in college football? How is he a starting quarterback in college football? Make it make sense. Simply put, he's not good. And the NFL conversations that once were, can we put those to bed as well? I mean, can we absolutely put those conversations to bed about DJU in the NFL? I mean, give me a break. This guy is not good. He's not good at his job. He needs to be benched, just like Bryce Young was today. It's simply put, Florida State's a dumpster fire right now. Final hour of the program coming your way. The last chance for you to get in on the conversation, 71307. Start your text with the word fan. We'll get back into South Carolina as well as the NFL games that we did not get to. All that and more next.
Cold Bryson.
On the Fan Upstate.
Well, in case you've been under a rock for the last, 3.5 hours, I'm here to inform you that Bryce Young, the former, keyword former, starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, is now going to be moved to a new position. You know what that position is? RB. RB, that's the new position for Bryce Young. No, not running back, but right bench. The Panthers saying bye as of now to Bryce Young by putting him on the bench. What is your reaction? What is your thoughts? 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Again, 71307, keyword fan. Phone lines are also open as well during this segment. 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. You know, I've realized what the situation in the upstate is. I've put a finger on you Panther fans, because a lot of times Diesel and I will talk Carolina Panthers football and we'll get 5 to 10 messages about it. Not as many messages during a segment as we get during Carolina Clemson. But I've pegged you guys. I've pegged them. Here's what it is. You're out there. I see you on Facebook. I see you on Twitter or X. I see you on TikTok. I see you. I hear from you. I know you're there, but I've pegged you. And I know that you Panther fans are going through a major identity crisis. I get it. I would not, in the time as of now, I would not want to be known as a Panther fan. I get it. You suck. You're not good. Right? Your owner's I don't even know if we can use that word on the radio or not. Your quarterback's no good. Your franchise quarterback, I say that in air quotes, just got benched. So I've pegged you, Panthers fans. You're there, but you're not here. What I mean is you're not outspoken. And I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to be either. If David Tepper was my owner, I'd get it. I'd be the same way. Now, look. As the Tolos have done a fantastic job of reminding me the entire segment, or the entire show rather, the Cowboys lost yesterday. My owner is Jerry Jones. I can talk a little trash, but I can't talk much trash because, we hadn't won anything in 4 billion years either, right? However, I've pegged you Panthers fans, and I now know where you are. You're here, but you're not here in a way that you don't want to call into a local sports radio show and say that you're a Panthers fan. It'll hurt your reputation. You don't want to text in and tell the entire upstate that John in Greenville's a Panthers fan. Your neighbors will look at you weird, right? You'll start getting those side eyes when you're going down the road walking your dog. I get it. However, I'm going to still speak to you. I'm still going to talk to you because I know you're there. Wesley Roberts on the Facebook stream chimes in. They need to make changes and big statements. This isn't going to change much, but it is showing they are making a change. Can we agree on one thing today, Cole? ... Panthers suck. Wesley, I can agree with you on that. That Carolina right now, the fan base of the Panthers, doesn't have much hope. They don't have much, anything to look forward to. They don't have a lot of talent on that team, just to put it quite frank. Yeah, they're NFL players. You tell me, Cole, it's tough to get to the NFL. You don't know how hard it is to make it to the NFL. I get it. They're talented, but they're not as talented as the team they're lining up against, right? That's the issue. Bryce Young, breaking news as of 2 o'clock today, 2:30 today, made the show very much more, intriguing in terms of, a sportscaster's job. Look, I mean, the dream job is to have some news break right before you go on air. Well, that happened today, and we're circling back to it. If, big if you're a Panthers fan out there today, and you're bold enough to swarm out of the crowd, raise your hand in this identity crisis that you have, and call in or text in, you can do so. If not, I'll tell you my opinion on this entire Bryce Young situation. Text line, phone lines are both open. You know how to get in touch with me. I've told you enough today. If you don't, I'll tell you again in a few minutes. So Andy Dalton, now the quarterback of Carolina. What do we do? What do we think? What do we say? I'll tell you, I believe Dave Canales is in a very unique position, right? He's in a position where he was hired as the head football coach to win games. The head football coach of a professional organization does have a relationship and does work on a daily basis with the general manager, the front office, and the owner. It does work that way. There is a correlation between those positions, right? However, at the end of the day, the head coach's job is to win with what's on the field. And to me, again, not being in the organization, not knowing exactly what Dave Canales is thinking here, to me, this screams, look, I don't have any more time to waste trying to deal with your BS of not knowing who the quarterback is or what direction we're going as a franchise. It looks to me as if Dave Canales is saying, hey, I've got to win and I've got to make decisions that allow me to win now. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, I'm not sure what the overwhelming or overarching thought process is with David Tepper on this new decision. However, I'll say this. Dave Tepper, his job is to give his coach talent. He hasn't done that. Dave Canales' job is to win. I don't know what the role that Dave Tepper had in the Bryce Young decision, but here's what Dave Canales said earlier today.
I want to keep that private. What I would like to say, though, is this is something after I watched the film, I looked at it, had a thought, started working on talking to the guys that we make decisions with. Certainly a lot of parties involved there. And ultimately this comes on me, and my number one responsibility is to help the Panthers win. And so this move, I believe, puts us in the best chance to do that this week.
Oh, so you're saying Dave Canales just said exactly what I said. His job, yes, developing players, helping the front office understand what players they want to acquire. Yeah, that's all part of the job. But at the end of the day, his only job is to WIN. And I'll even go a step further. His job is to WINNOW, right? He can't control what David Tepper does. He can't control what drinks David Tepper throws on what fans from what fan base. But what he just said when Dave Canales declined the question of if Dave Tepper had any say, that screams to me that he did. I'll replay it from the beginning.
I want to keep that private.
I want to keep that private. So he was asked, Dave Canales was asked, what role David Tepper had in the Bryce Young decision.
I want to keep that private.
Well, I'm sure you do, because he had a role. The owner, Dave Tepper, you expect us to believe that man didn't have a role? Are you kidding me? He's not telling the truth. He's not telling you the whole story. Dave Tepper absolutely had something to do with it. Look, and Dave Tepper, as bleep crazy or as bat bleep crazy as Dave Tepper is, it wouldn't surprise me for Dave Tepper to fire Dave Canales at the end of the season. Should he? No, we all know that. That'd be ridiculous, right? But are you expecting me to believe that David Tepper isn't micromanaging as usual? I mean, this dumpster fire that David Tepper has with his name on it, with his John Hancock signed right across it, heck, the Panthers right now can't even achieve, mediocrity. They can't even be okay. They can't even be decent. They have to choose the absolute worst. I think he lied. I think Dave Tepper absolutely impacted the decision and impacted whether or not Bryce Young is the quarterback going forward. He looks like a micromanager. He walks like a micromanager. He talks like a micromanager. And if he walks like a duck and talks like a duck, guess what? He's probably a duck. And I think, to be kind about it, Dave Tepper is definitely a duck. I don't know. Again, there's a great conversation to be had about what you do now with Andy Dalton winning, 3-4 games, and we'll get into that in a second. But what do you achieve? I'm not saying they shouldn't have done this. I'm simply playing devil's advocate. What do you achieve by throwing Andy Dalton in? A lot of people argue Dalton should have started last year, and I get that. That's fine. I agree with you. He's the better quarterback. Your job as a head coach is to play the better quarterback. But let's just say, I'm going to give an illustration, give an example here. This may happen. It may not happen. But let's just pretend. This is a pretend world we're living in right now. Andy Dalton gets the start. He goes and beats the Raiders. Well, next week he loses. And let's see, they have the Chiefs coming up. Let's say Andy Dalton goes and wins 4 games. So Andy Dalton finishes the season 4-12, whatever it is. That's what you've won. Carolina Panthers, instead of getting to celebrate in 1 win, you celebrate 4. Hoo-hoo-ha, right? Have a party, throw a celebration, throw a parade in downtown Charlotte. Andy Dalton gives you 3 to 4 more wins than Bryce Young did. Throw a freaking celebration. I'm just playing devil's advocate. If you want the best player, if you want Quinn Ewers, if you want Carson Beck or whoever it may be, what does this do to help you get them? What is your end goal? That's what's important to establish here. What is your end goal? Because if your end goal this year is to get Quinn Ewers or to go get Bryce Young's replacement, bringing in Andy Dalton's not going to give you Quinn Ewers. You may be stuck with a quarterback that's middle of the line, right? You may be stuck with Shedeur Sanders. I don't know who you'll be stuck with, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. If you win 4 or 5 games, you're not getting the number 1 overall pick. You're not getting Quinn Ewers. You're not getting whoever you want. Again, while I understand the Panthers in doing this, this isn't a win. This isn't a win now team. You can't convince me of that. So we're delaying the inevitable, right? You can't put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. That's what we're doing here. I don't get it. Look, I know Dalton's the better quarterback than Bryce Young. I'm not denying that. And if it were my decision, I would probably do the same thing. I would probably start Andy Dalton over Bryce Young. However, what does it gain you? 3 more wins? 4 more wins? What do you say? Tolo, 71307. Tolo stands for Turn On, Leave On. That's what we ask you to do each and every day right here on the Fan Upstate. Turn it on, leave it on, whether it's the Rob Brown Show, Jim Rome, or Wire to Wire. Tolo all day long. Let's go to the text line. 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Let's see. 415 chimes in. The 415 says, I've already got my Arch Manning Panthers jersey ordered for 2 years from now. I like it. Would that be 2 years from now? Is that right? Is Arch eligible for the draft? Are you saying that, Texter, that's an interesting conversation. Are you saying that Arch Manning, who we don't expect to play this year, unless Quinn Ewers, gets injured again or stays out for a significant period, are you implying that Arch Manning would only have 1 year next year to show his talents? He has a good year at Texas, and that 1 year is enough for him to be propelled to the number 1 overall pick? Because that's the way it reads, Texter, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but boy, is that fair on a quarterback to only give him 1 year to show what he's got? And then, by the way, hey, no pressure, Arch Manning, no pressure at all, but all we need you to do, number 1, we need you to follow in every single one of your relatives that have played football's footsteps and be great. Hall of Famer, Super Bowl winner, right? No pressure. We need you to have a good enough year at Texas next year That way you're drafted number 1 or number 2 overall. And, oh, by the way, no pressure again, but can you resurrect this franchise by yourself single-handedly for the Carolina Panthers? Can you resurrect them with a bat bleep crazy owner who has no idea what he's doing? Can you resurrect them from the grave and bring them back to where they were with Cam Newton? By the way, no pressure in any of that, because I've said it once. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. No pressure, Arch Manning. But we need you to do this, and this. I mean, come on. What kind of pressure does that put on a quarterback? That's tough. But, hey, Arch will probably be the number 1 overall pick. I'm sure of it. Alex chimes in on the text line. Alex says, excited to see what the rest of this roster can do with Andy Dalton. Well, to your point, Alex, we appreciate you texting into the show. And by we, I mean me. I'm solo today. Diesel will be back tomorrow. Excited to see what the rest of the roster can do with Andy Dalton. So I'll say this. The rest of the roster, to your point, to your text, Alex, I do think will benefit from Andy Dalton. I believe that a veteran like Andy Dalton, when you talk about having to win now, I believe that a veteran will do several things. Number 1, he'll be able to see the field better and get your guys involved. From a receiver standpoint, I believe you'll see more receivers involved, and you'll see the ball spread around a little bit better with Andy Dalton. He can see the field. He can see the field better, not because he's taller, but because he's experienced. Right. Number 2, a guy like Andy Dalton, who is an NFL vet, who's been in the NFL for quite some time now. I don't want to just go out on a limb and say he's a plug-and-play guy. However, he does give you the ability to plug him in and to play him in a Dave Canales offense much better than a rookie who's not tall enough to see over the offensive line, and much better than a rookie who can't see the field well right now, who just seems like he's rushing everything. So Andy Dalton and Dave Canales' offense, to my point, I believe will be able to execute the offense. I'm not saying at this ultra high level, but in terms of efficiency and the amount of time needed in a week-to-week league that is the NFL, I do believe that Andy Dalton will be able to put this offense on display quicker than Bryce Young because of his experience in the league. So that's a positive. Again, he's not your long-term solution. He's not your guy. It's just fascinating to me that they chose to go with Andy Dalton now versus, a year and a half ago when Bryce Young probably could have sat on the bench for another 10 years. So it's interesting, and I cannot wait to hear what pundits have to say, like the Ryan Clarks, the guys on the pregame shows tonight. I know they're talking about it live on ESPN now as they're previewing the Phillies game. Let's hear what Ryan Clark of ESPN has to say about Bryce Young.
You're done on that team. There is no playing Andy Dalton and now reinserting Bryce Young. They might as well try to trade him, figure out what they can do with him, not dress him for games. But what changed for Dave Canales in between yesterday and today? Yesterday, he said that Bryce Young was his quarterback going forward. Coming into practice today or coming into the media today, he made a different decision. He's saying right now that my job is more important than preparing Bryce Young or giving Bryce Young an opportunity to develop for the future. He's saying, I want to win this week, not I want to figure out if Bryce Young can help me win going forward. Right. Because Andy Dalton is not going to be your franchise quarterback.
Well, clearly not at 36.
Right. Yeah, you know that no matter how well Andy Dalton plays this year, you are starting over next year at the position. And to be able to make that decision 2 games into your first year as head coach with a second-year player that was drafted number 1 overall is an extremely heavy decision.
Wow. I like that. You know what? I like the boldness there from Ryan Clark of ESPN, just saying how he feels. And look, I agree. He's right. It's his second game ever as the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. And what's so fascinating about what Ryan Clark just said is, look, yesterday it was a different story. Today it's, we need to bench him. And then when you're asked about it, you're not going to go into detail about what went into the decision. Well, why don't you just come out and say, yeah, my owner told me that I had to bench him. You know, that's the type of transparency that I want in the NFL, right? If we're going to make these decisions, I want the owner to have to come down and say, look, I messed up. I made a terrible decision by taking this guy, and now I'm going to – I mean, let's really call a spade here and put blame on who deserves the blame instead of Dave Canales being the scapegoat, because that's what he is. He's the scapegoat. And to Ryan Clark's point, he's trying to win now. Well, yeah, Ryan Clark, he's trying to win now. That's his job, right? He's got to put all the good tape on. He's got to put all the good film on tape that he can, because he knows that this crazy owner up at the box may fire him at the end of the season. At the end of the day, dude, you got to look out for you. Yeah, Bryce Young's development's important, but Canales has to look out for Canales. We don't know what crazy Tepper's going to do at the end of the year, right? Texter says, as a Panthers fan, what do we have to lose? I like Bryce as a person, but he has just not been able to be it so far. Maybe him stepping back and getting to see it from the side will benefit him in the long run. Texter says, is there a possibility Panthers are moving on from Bryce Young? ? Also, is Jackson Dart an option for the Panthers in the 2025 draft? Texter, I wouldn't just sound the alarm right now and say they're moving on from Bryce Young, but this definitely could be looked at as a step in that direction, right? So if you told me it was a step in the direction, I certainly would believe it. All right, we'll continue the conversation as well as get into what did Shane Beamer have to say yesterday in his Sunday teleconference. Your thoughts, a lot more on the in the next two segments as we put a bow on Monday's Wire to Wire.
You're listening to the underground of Sports Talk Radio, where we're not afraid to get dirty.
It's Wire to Wire with Diesel and Cole Bryson on the Fan Upstate.
didn't have time earlier in the show to get to all of the games in the NFL this past weekend because as soon as I started talking about my Dallas Cowboys, every Tolo out there started clowning me. How about them Cowboys? I get it. You win, and it's crickets. You lose, and everyone wants to paint you in a corner. That's the way it is. There's nothing like being a Cowboys fan, man. There's nothing like it. But we do have Falcons Eagles tonight. You can get your thoughts in, predictions on that game, thoughts on the renewal by Anderson, the Carolinas fan phone as well. 844-FAN phone. That's the phone line. You know the text line. You've got it saved in your phone. 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Philadelphia, 5.5-point favorites tonight. I do like Philly in the points tonight. I think they cover at home. I think they have a big night. What has Atlanta shown us in week one that makes you believe they're going to cover the spread? Not much. I really don't know exactly what to make of this Atlanta team. Kirk Cousins isn't good. It's just it's a unique situation where you're kind of counting the days that Kirk Cousins has, even though he just got this bajillion-dollar contract, right? You just don't know how much time he truly has as the starter. Maybe it's one game. Maybe it's another 3 years. Who really knows? And that's the problem with the decision that they made to lock him up on that kind of contract that they did. And man, I believe as an NFL fan, when you look at that decision that was made, I know that GMs make decisions based on what they think is right in terms of what value a player brings to a roster and what his potential is over the life of that contract and guaranteed money and how these quarterbacks' salaries reset the market and the quarterback market. I get all of that, but I just don't know how someone can look at in the Atlanta front office, how someone can look at the situation that they find themselves in and think, oh yeah, us signing Kirk Cousins to this mega deal with a 4-year extension was the right move. I in no way, shape, or form see how that's possible. Now, over the weekend, Aaron Rodgers did get his first win as a New York Jet. Now, that sounds weird to say, right? It sounds weird to say that. However, he lasted, 4 plays last season. So the Jets get a 24-17 win over the Titans. I tell you, the game that was very intriguing to me that we didn't have time to touch on earlier was Minnesota-San Fran, man. Minnesota 2-0 on the season behind Sam Darnold. I mean, who would have thought that Sam Darnold and the Vikings would be able to defend home field the way that they did yesterday? 23-17 over San Francisco, a big win. And, man, San Francisco yesterday showed some vulnerability. They really did. They just didn't look the best at times. Minnesota, despite McCarthy going down for Minnesota, boy, do they look the part. They really do. And, look, I've watched a lot of NFL. I've covered a lot of football, but I don't recall covering or rather watching a game where what we saw yesterday between Washington and New York played out in front of our eyes, rather. What do I mean? If you don't know, Washington versus New York yesterday, and I want you to listen very closely when I say this. Washington scored 0 offensive touchdowns. New York scored 3. And Washington won the football game. Think about that. New York scored 3 times. Daniel Jones had 2 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels for Washington had 0. There were no offensive touchdowns scored by the Washington Commanders, and they won the game 21-18 over the Giants. I mean, we all know the Giants are bad, but how do you score 3 touchdowns? Devin Singletary scored 1. Daniel Jones scored 2. And you lost the game to a team that didn't score a single freaking offensive touchdown. Explain to me how that happens. Explain to me how a team can score 3 touchdowns and lose to a team that scores 0. Texter from the 415 text into the show, which you can do 71307. Texter says, Cole, we will never let you live it down that you are a Cowboys fan. We all love to see the Cowboys lose. Well, Texter, we appreciate you. You're right. I can't deny that. It comes with the territory, right? We all know what the Chargers and Panthers did yesterday, 26-3. You know, Diesel and I last week had David Newton on of ESPN, who covers the Carolina Panthers, and I asked David on the air, David, 6.5 points in favor of Carolina. It's got to feel like a game that's an easy cover for the Chargers, right? Only 6.5 points. What are you thinking? I mean, how is that game so close in terms of the spread? Well, David Newton says, look, it's a home game for Carolina. The Chargers weren't great last weekend. Regardless of what David Newton said, I'm here to tell you that I told you last week, take the 6.5, take the Chargers minus 6.5, and BTH. BTH on the 6.5, and they covered by a mile. That was an easy win. I have no idea why that spread was the way it was. I get home field advantage, but the Panthers were absolutely dreadful, and we're only 6.5 point favorites. Speaking of dreadful, man, this is a tough conversation to have. Where are we at now on Trevor Lawrence? Trevor Lawrence losing to the Browns yesterday. Browns now 1-1. Jacksonville Jaguars now 0-2 on the season. Only able to score 13 points yesterday. Haven't won a game yet. We all know how the Jacksonville season went last year. Started out great. They, won 6 of their first 8 games and then plummeted down the stretch. A tough conversation to be had. We all know what's going on with Deshaun Watson. We all know what kind of headspace he's having to deal with. But on the Jacksonville side of things, boy, oh boy. I mean, things started out really rough with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and then Doug Peterson arrived on the scene. And now I would argue, and I didn't think I'd say this a year ago, but I would argue that Doug Peterson is now in the hot seat. I mean, what has he done in Jacksonville outside of his first year where they had a good year, and then he collapses last year? It's just Trevor Lawrence doesn't look comfortable. Christian Kirk's his best receiver. Is that right? Is that what we're going with here? Travis Etienne's just not consistent enough in the NFL. I don't know what it is, but there's a high level of concern for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. They're just not it, man. They're just not it. And I don't know what's got to be fixed. I don't know if Trevor's going to need at some point in his career to be traded. But that's a crazy scenario that I just can't quite wrap my head around in terms of why they're not better than they are. I don't know if it's coaching. I don't know what it is. Speaking of not better than they are, Las Vegas yesterday, 26-23 over Baltimore. Baltimore now begins the season after yesterday's loss to Las Vegas and then the season opening loss against the Kansas City Chiefs. Baltimore now 0-2 on the season. Not the start you wanted for Patrick Mahomes, who got Derrick Henry in the backfield with him, and just a bad start. Speaking of 0-2 start, the Cardinals 41-10 yesterday over the LA Rams. A horrific start for the Rams, who a lot of people, including myself, were high on in the offseason as a potential dark horse in the NFC. Kyler Murray yesterday had a really good day. It was video game-like numbers for Kyler Murray, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns. James Conner was really good on the ground, 100-plus yards for him, showed that he's still a good back. They played a really good game yesterday. The Rams didn't, but then probably the game of the day, an AFC game that we've seen multiple times, not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well. Chiefs edge out the Bengals 26-25. The Chiefs scored 9 points in the fourth quarter. I tell you what, man, Joe Burrow, he was good yesterday, but it's like Diesel and I talked about last week, man. There's just something with Patrick Mahomes. It's just Patrick Mahomes, man, just has that it factor, right? He just has that it factor that it doesn't matter what your lead is. It doesn't matter what your team does. It doesn't matter how much time's left on the clock. He's going to find a way to get it done. And he's just he's the best quarterback, not because he's the tallest and has the biggest arm and can run the fastest. He's the biggest quarterback because he simply has the it factor that a lot of other quarterbacks in the history of the NFL just haven't had. Now, the injury to Isaiah Pacheco, that's concerning. What does Kansas City do now with the run game? That's a big concern. We'll wrap up the show, put a bow on this Monday edition of Wire to Wire next.
rights for a year. From the Ingalls Market Studio, the Fan.
You know, we were talking to David Hood earlier in the show, and one thing that has really surprised the heck out of me is the start that NC State's had to the 2024 season. I mean, we thought that Grayson McCall would give them, a better chance and a better showing in that very first game against Western Carolina. They weren't good, right? And now I know Grayson McCall is injured now, and that makes a difference. I'm not saying that doesn't have a play in it, but when you look at this game for Clemson on Saturday, coming off a bye week, Clemson hosting NC State noon kick, 20.5 points. Are you kidding me? 20-point spread. I mean, that's where we are. We talked about this game in the offseason being a game that Clemson has to watch out for. So it's hard to have this tough schedule conversation if you're Clemson, if one of the tougher games on your schedule in NC State's 20.5 points better than you are. And David Hood, who we talked to earlier in the show at 4:20, if you missed that interview, you can catch it on the Odyssey app. The rewind feature is how you can access that. Just download the free Odyssey app and search the Fan Upstate. But, man, David Hood said it. You look at the rest of this schedule. You lost to Georgia 34-3. You whooped App State's butt. You had a bye week last week. Then you have NC State, who you're favored over 20.5 by, right? No concern there. Not with a backup quarterback, true freshman making the start at Clemson. You can shut that down. The defense of Clemson will shut that down pretty quick. Stanford at Memorial Stadium the following week, 7 o'clock kick. By the way, homecoming for Clemson announced today, 7 o'clock kickoff against Stanford. You can't expect much there. And then you go to Doak Campbell Stadium the very next week and you play a team that can't even find their head in you know what right now. I mean, you can't even get their head out of their own you know what, to be quite frank. 0-3, couldn't beat Memphis, couldn't beat Georgia Tech. I don't know who they could beat right now. So that's not going to be a challenge. Then you're at Wake Forest. Wake Forest isn't any good. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's quit acting like this is a tough schedule for the Tigers. Then they host Tony Elliott in Virginia. They'll beat them by 43 points. Then they have a bye week after a brutal stretch. They deserve a bye week. And then you do have a little bit of a competition or a little bit of a competitive stretch, if you will. November 2nd, you're hosting Louisville, number 19 in the country right now. I don't know what they'll be then, but a very good Louisville team. We think it's a very good team, right? They're a good team. We just don't know how good. Small sample size. So far, they've done well. Then you're at Virginia Tech, who may give them a game for a half. Then you're at Pitt, who may give them a game for a half. Then you host a Citadel, and then you host South Carolina, which should be a good test. I think that South Carolina game will end up being a lot more competitive than a lot of people thought at the beginning of the season, just based on how good South Carolina has looked in the first 3 games. So when you look at Clemson in 2024, it looks as if, and I know injuries can happen, things can happen, but right now, all signs, if we're just being very honest, all signs are pointing to Clemson playing on December the 7th at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. What's stopping them? Who's going to stop them from doing so, right? They're not going to lose an ACC game. Could they lose to South Carolina? Maybe. South Carolina is going to be a good test for them if South Carolina can stay healthy between now and then. That's a long time from now, November the 30th. But to David Hood's point, this schedule does set up very nicely. And even though they had a horrific start against Georgia to start the season where the offense didn't get off the bus, a 34-3 loss, even though that's in the rearview mirror, you won't play a team the rest of the year even remotely close to them, and the only one you will play anywhere close to them, South Carolina. At the end of the year, at your place. Like I said, you get them at Clemson. So what looked as if was going to be an okay schedule for Clemson preseason has turned into, well, Georgia's still good, but NC State's not who we thought they'd be. Florida State's nowhere near the team we thought they would be, right? I mean, who else do you have? Yeah, you have that stretch with Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Pitt. That's it. My point is, Clemson has a very good shot at running the table and being a one-loss team going into that South Carolina football game. I mean, they really do, if we're just being quite frank. Could Louisville or Pitt give them a scare? Sure. But if the offense finds their groove and Dabo lets Garrett Riley continue to do what Garrett Riley did against App State and absolutely demolish teams, which he very well could in the ACC, who don't have the best defenses in the world, you could see this Clemson team very well playing on December the 7th in Charlotte, in my opinion, against Miami, who, unless something catastrophic happens, Miami will be there. Miami will be there in Charlotte, and it looks like it's going to be Miami-Clemson on December the 7th. It's still early. A lot could happen, but that's what we do. We predict, we project. Another episode of Wire to Wire. Diesel's back tomorrow. We'll see you then.